I still had a few questions, like did the bite ever go bad, or when it worked, would it cure cancer? Could we get cancer? But maybe those weren't the kind of questions you should be asking a kid. But maybe other people had questions about things I wouldn't think to ask? I think that's all I got right now, kiddo, but maybe you can answer some other people's questions, okay? She nodded eagerly. I gave Charles a warning look. So does anybody got something to ask the kid? With a little emphasis on kid. Charles gave a little nod. Good, he would keep it kid-friendly. Ami rushed out a quick question before anyone else could. Hi, I'm Ami, this is Sarah and Aaron. And that's our older cousin Charles. Grandpa didn't bother to tell us your names. She gave me a stern look that broke down into a look of sheer mischief. She was right, I should have made some introductions. The girl perked up. I'm Mel, my mom's name is Deborah, or Debbie, or Miss Adams, and that's Dare and his grandma Dora, or Sheriff Karras. Ami whispered the names to herself as each was introduced, before peppering the girl, Mel, with her questions. Do you have a wolf name? Can you talk to wolves? Or dogs? Do dogs get freaked out by werewolves? Can you have a dog? I interrupted the barrage of questions with a two-fingered tap on top of her head, to which she reacted like I had smacked her and gave me a look of betrayal. One question at a time. Mel turned to her mom eagerly. I can have a wolf name? What kind of name can I pick? Or does somebody else pick? Can I be Dawn Raider? Ami, cranial injury forgotten, looked up eagerly as well. The mom, worried, looked back and forth between her roommate and boss. Wolf names? Is that a thing? Both were holding back laughter, as Adora shook her head. No, Darius just calls her that because she keep waking up before you two do. She leaned toward the girl. But you can have a wolf name if you want to, it can be a thing now. She leaned back and took a pose. I will be the Silver Moon, and you mother can be Blurter of Secrets. Her grandson knocked his fist the top of the table. Fenris, calling it. Dibs. That got a laugh from most of the adult, even a somewhat harassed-looking Deborah, who was still embarrassed after being called out for outing the presence of the kids. The kids themselves seemed confused as to what the adult were so amused about and just waiting us out so they could get back to the importunate stuff. Ami got Mel's attention again. Sue? Wolves, dogs? Mel tried to remember. I never met a real wolf, but I know I can't talk to anyone when I'm in my wolf body, not even other werewolves. Dogs do get scared, but that's because I'm someone they don't know. If they do know me, they just want to play in whatever body I'm in, but Mom doesn't like me to play rough with them because I'm too strong. That's also why I had to be homeschooled the last few years, because I got too strong too fast when I was little. She looked sad at that, but Sarah nodded at her. Me too. It was only for a year, but then I was in junior high when I went back. She frowned. I would rather have stuck with the homeschooling. Ami looked sad as well. I got pulled out this year, because my powers came in. Mel looked confused. Powers? Are you a werewolf too? Her mom and Dare just looked curious, having apparently been warned by Adora. My granddaughter shook her head. No. I'm a witch. The girl, Mel, began to get excited. For real, you can do magic? She gave me a curious look. Can you all do magic? Did I make you into a magic werewolf? I shook my head. Nah, kiddo. I was just plain vanilla human before you chomped down on me. The girl blushed and sunk down a bit. Sarah is Supergirl, Aaron is too young to know yet, and Charles is the most powerful of us all. The girl looked over to him as he gave her a little smile. What are you? She asked in a somewhat nervous tone of wonder. He leaned forward. I am what all men fear. An attorney at law. She didn't get it, but saw the adults did, and responded with an eye roll and a tisk sound. After that she asked Ami to show me some magic, and the kids headed off to the other end of the open area behind the house I had designated as the barbecue grounds, and the rest of yous turned to some more serious questions as I kept one eye on the kids. You know, in case Ami loses it and sends the wolf kid into the side of the house, or if Mel goes wolf and starts snapping at people. Standard concerns. Charles took the lead. So, if I understand this. Because my uncle turned into a werewolf from being bitten once, and is also strong for a werewolf. There is a good chance I could become one as well. The younger two turned to look at Adora. She gave Charles a look of consideration. That is true, but not guaranteed. If you did want to become one of us, you would have to leave the city. Even the vampires who look down on the ones who drink our blood would think you are there to spy on them. And the ones who do target us. She shook her head. Even if they did not attack you themselves, others would, since there is a market. She raised her hands up, as if she was helpless to offer any other options. There is work here for a lawyer who is one of us, and once word gets out, others would be interested in a lawyer who is other, even among the vampires themselves. But you would have to leave your home, and even give up visiting cities, at least without guards. Since even during the day, it would be dangerous. She looked back and forth between the two of us. But I think you already suspected most of this, and it is not you that you are asking for. She leaned forward and stared down the table at Charles with a serious look. So why not lay down your cards and tell me what it is that you want, attorney to wolves? Charles nodded as if he was agreeing to something and set his fingertips one by one on the tabletop with each question. My father, Uncle John's full-blooded brother, had lung cancer several years ago. He's also down a leg, but it's the cancer coming back that concerns us. Can my uncle save my father from another round of chemo that probably won't work? Can he get his leg and his health back? Can he get the extra years that becoming one of you grants even at his age? Adora looked a little set aback and thoughtful. The last gave me hope. My family were all born as Lycaos, as were most of those who had settled in this area. So the truth is, I really don't know much about those who have turned into one of us after being bitten. She glanced over to me for a moment before she continued. My husband was of the few I have known. One of his fellow soldiers, whose family was from this area, bit him in hopes that it would help him survive his wounds, and it did, but he was only injured, not fighting a sickness. She nodded, more to herself as she was deep in thought. However, his father, and some of his family were taken by cancer, while my Dorian never got sick, even for a day, for the rest of his life. Adora looked up at Charles with a fond smile in remembrance. And Rian was not one of the strong ones, it would take him an entire night to turn human again. With a slight shake of her head, she continued. I haven't heard of any of us getting cancer, or sick, or even getting any of ailments of age. Our vision stays sharp, as do our minds. We just get tired as we age, more and more until we just drift away at some point. She rolled her eyes at some memory. Or we do something too stupid to heal from long before that. My uncle decided to race cars. Idiot. Adora looked over to me. Violence too, a shotgun to the head can kill anyone. She tossed her hair back and tried to force herself into a better mood. Almost anything else gets fixed by changing, if you are strong enough, and not tired, or too skinny. Then it might have to wait until you've rested, and eaten well. She waved her hands around while she struggled to find the right words. It is magic, but a whole leg has to come from somewhere. Is you father fat? Charles laughed. Yeah, he's put on some weight. More than enough for a leg. Adora smiled. He should have a lot of milk and cheese after. I remember my uncle breaking some teeth on some hard candy right after he regrew an arm, so it probably leaches calcium from your bones. She shook her head at the memory. Anoitos. The fool tried playing with a mechanical thresher. Charles sighed and relaxed in his chair. I reached over to lay my hand on top of Adora's. Thank you. She seemed surprised and may have even blushed a little. I gave her hand a little squeeze before sitting back. Is it going to be any sort of problem to turn my brother into a Lycos, you said? She frowned a bit in confusion. Oh. No, it was Lycaos, to be like Lycaon, a King Zeus turned into a wolf. I nodded and joked. So that's who to blame. Adora tittered. No, we don't know for sure how we came about. But. She glacéed over to where the girls were playing keep away with a twig floating around in the air, both Sarah and Mel jumping several feet in the air as Ami stared up at the stick intently, magically jerking it out of their reach each time at the last moment to their shrieks and curses. The younger girl was doing the shrieking both in excitement and disappointment as the stick popped up out of her reach, while Sarah was yelling something angry sounding as her sister in Japanese. I suspect she was taking full advantage of all the adults in earshot not being able to understand her, to freely use all the words some of her cousins had undoubtedly taught her. I held up my hands beside my face to yell. Ami! You got to let them win once in a while or it stops being fun. For them anyways. She whipped her head around and Sarah took advantage of the distraction to snatch the stick out the air, while bumping into a leaping Mel on her way down. Sending them both to land awkwardly on the ground, Mel somehow ending up with stick and running off with Sarah in pursuit, calling her Baka. Wait, I know that one, and I think it's kid safe. This was the first time the rest of the people at the table had seen magic, other than turning into wolves, and they looked fairly shocked, even after I had warned them. Dare whispered. She's really a witch, that's real magic. He sounded more concerned than amazed. Sarah stopped her pursuit and turned to look over at us at the tone in his voice. Adora spoke in a careful tone of voice. My father always told us to avoid magic workers, because he believed that since they could command us with their magic so easily, that it was they who made us as to be their slaves. That brought the table to an awkward silence. The kids seemed to sense it as well as the three of them turned to look at us. 3. Hey. Sarah, Ami, where's Aaron? They looked around, only slightly concerned, while Mel pointed over into the woods. He was picking up sticks and went that way. I gave the girls an expectant look and made a shooing motion toward the woods. They raced off in pursuit, with only Ami lingering for a moment to give us a suspicious look before turning to follow at Sarah's shout. We all sat still for a moment, before I shared my own suspicions. Not just as slaves, but as weapons. That got me some curious looks. Self-replicating, able to disappear into the wilderness, or mix in with other people as an infiltration. No need to supply us with weapons, or for us to sneak one around with them, and the halfway form feels like it combines the best of being human and wolf to fight with. That got me some more weird looks, before Adora hesitantly asked. You can turn into something not wolf or man? She seemed more resigned than shocked. What did I do now? Am I not supposed to? She hesitated, as her grandson and deputy looked at with great interest. Now she was blushing. I've only turned into that 2 times. Dorian had changed for the first time and was running around in the hills, howling and chasing my family's sheep around. He claimed he was only doing for the thrill, not because of how hungry he was, but my family just saw him as an intruder. She looked away from all of us. I had volunteered to help at the hospital, so I knew his scent. When I saw them chasing him, I was determined for them to hear me for once, and the moon was full, so I stopped them. She shrugged off the memory. I think I embarrassed them, even scared them. So when Myrian asked me to marry him, they were more than happy for me to go off and live far away in America. And I only has been so angry and determined to make a point one other time. Darius whispered. I remember. We were all silent again, before Adora gave me a concerned look. What happened when you? I pursed my lips and looked off into the distance. I wanted to scare the kids, but it was just my hand. I could feel the stares. Charles chuckled. Let me guess, that's why the Bertinellis billed you for a new patio door. I sighed. Yeah, she threw up her hands and tore the whole thing out of the wall, frame and all, and tossed it, along with me, across the entire patio. Mel's mom looked out toward the woods in concern. She's got it a lot more under control, and I doubt your daughter is going to do any more startling than turning into wolf, which Ami is probably trying to egg her on to do right this moment since all 4 of them have managed to get out of our sight. Deborah gave me a surprised look before getting up and heading for the trees, calling out for her daughter. Melinda, get back here right now, and you better still be human. I told you no shape changing. Dare did his best to stifle his laughter as he watched his roommate stomp off before turning back to the rest of us. So you can turn into something that is nearly only a legend, even to us, and you use it to scare your own grandchildren. He looked back and forth between me and his grandmother. I approve, best use for it. I glanced at Adora. So is it going to be a problem, her having magic? She shook her head slightly. If she can use it? But doesn't, unless to defend herself, then no. I won't have a problem, and I doubt most of the locals would even know it was a possibility. Then she smirked. If any big bad wolf starts acting scared of a little witch girl, they will have to move to another state to stop the mockery. She turned to me. You and yours are safe in my county, at least from the locals. I gave her a smile. Glad to hear it, but how many can be safe here? She looked concerned. What do you mean? I paused to make sure I had the right words. It's not about the power, but the health benefits. How can I not at least offer the chance to have a long healthy life, with no fear of their bodies or minds betraying them due to age, to everyone in my family? And not just my family. What about friends, even strangers, who are good people? Where do I draw the line when I got something this good that costs me nothing to share? Great, that killed the conversation again. Everyone stared at our local sheriff as she sat there struggling to come up with an answer, before she finally shrugged. I think turning that many people would ultimately draw attention, and would place everyone who is other than unchanged human in danger. She intertwined her fingers together. For myself, I do not fear what could happen, not enough to ask someone to hold back from caring for their own, or those in need. As far as any concerns for my children or grandchildren. She smiled at Dare. They are adults and can take care of themselves, but I fear that those who hunt our kind may still be out there. Then she looked me in the eyes, a clear challenge. As for your own, are you willing to put them in danger to help strangers? Family, yes, clearly, but a good man or woman in need who you don't even know you can actually help. She shrugged again. I have no authority to tell you what you can do as a werewolf, at least anything that isn't breaking any laws. I would not want anyone to claim such authority. But for myself, I would say help your own, and you many find that more than enough to deal with that looking for more people to turn won't. She waved her hands around awkwardly. Be such a pressing concern. I sagged down in my chair and gave her a wry grin. Same old story, huh? Idealism can't last when it goes up against exhaustion. Sitting back up, I got myself to my feet and held out my hand to Adora. But we aren't here to figure out if outing the existence of werewolves is a good idea. We're here to eat. She gave me a hesitant smile and took my hand as she stood up. I waved the two men down as they also began to stand up. You two keep an eye on the barbecue, we'll take care of the rest. I held out an arm to the sheriff and she took it with a quick laugh and a grin. You are quick enough to volunteer me, John. Are you sure you aren't plotting to take over as the alpha wolf? I automatically started to protest until I saw her grin and sly sideways look and instead grumbled out a yeah, you got me. I shall force all of you into becoming my minions to prepare salad and cornbread for all of your days. As we headed inside, Adora leaned in to whisper. The vampires would fear being outed if our existence became public knowledge. If you do this, you must choose to make it too well known, too quickly for them to try to make the problem, you, vanish. It must be all or nothing. I stopped for a moment in shock, before she jerked on my arm to get me moving again. Oh. Yeah. Them. I glanced down as Adora slipped free of my arm and began looking at the various ingredients laid out on the counter and island. She turned to me. You bake as well? I gave her a little bit of a glare. Give me a second to switch gears, Missy. She grinned and looked around the kitchen again, before heading over to the fridge. I'm guessing you don't have any aprons, so I will make a salad while you get flour all over yourself. I watched her for a second, deciding not to argue to let her have a win. Actually, Ami seemed pretty excited to bake, which leaves me either getting her upset for not calling her in from playing with a cute non-threatening werewolf puppy, or calling her away from the cute non-threatening werewolf puppy and making her bake. She glanced over thoughtfully. She will complain no matter what. Text her so it's her decision and she won't have an excuse to complain. Heh. I take it you had girls as well. She grinned as she set out lettuce, carrot sticks, and a cucumber on the kitchen island. 2 daughters and 3 sons spread out over 30 years, 3 early on, and 2 more after my Rian got used to the idea that he would have a long, youthful life. A large family for werewolves. Some cheese, lunch meat and an onion joined the produce. Ah, Mel didn't cover the one other thing Silver does. She looked over at me and pushed her hair back with a tie she had produced from somewhere to secure it behind her head. With enough silver piercing the skin we cannot change shape, so the girls wear earrings when they are pregnant to keep from changing on the nights of the full moon. If we don't, then when the pregnancy is far enough along, they can lose the child. She arranged everything she had gotten out in some sort of order that made sense to her. In the old days, we often lost the child before we even knew we were pregnant, so newly married women were forced to wear earrings at all times. She grinned to herself. Nowadays some of the girls use it as an excuse to get their husbands to buy them all the jewelry and piercing their parents never allowed them to get. She gave me an odd look. Text? Huh? Oh yeah. I dug out my phone and sent a text to the grandkid. Here now, if bake, I don't bother with punctuation mark on texts. If it's confusing, they can call me back. My text got all the girls, and a boy who didn't want to left out, running and loudly taking over the kitchen. The little bit of baking I had started, opening the box, was loudly protested by an 11-year-old pushing me away from the counter, and Adora was quickly outgirled as Sarah and Mel took over vegetable chopping. Our eyes met across the room and we slipped off to the patio table in the sunroom to keep a supervisory eye on the kids. She looked at the table for a moment and then outside to the matching one out under the tarp. Before she could ask, I informed her that they had a 2-for-1 sale, but I got the same table mostly so all the chairs would match. She rolled her eyes. Men, you always have a reason that makes sense to you. I shrugged. If you can keep an eye on the little monsters? Wait, can I say that with Mel? Kids. I'm going to fill up the coolers. She nodded regally and waved me permission. Go and then join the men outside, we girls will take care of everything else. She gave me a sinister grin. And talk. Shoot. Women talking, that's never good. I snagged Aaron since he was looking pretty lost, too short and too male to be allowed to help, and got him to follow me out to the garage with a come along, I can use your help. My old green metal cooler got stacked on top of the larger plastic one with the handle and wheels. With Aaron given the job of keeping the green one from falling off the larger one. It would have been more practical to take 2 trips rather than rely on the grimly dedicated 5-year-old who lost the top cooler twice, but that would have involved 2 trips, which is cause to lose your man card. I slid open the door to the kitchen only to have girlish laughter suddenly cut off as 4 female all looked at me wordlessly with amused looks as me and the boy crossed the kitchen to the hall closet. Closet is a little misleading considering the size of the room, but I wasn't sure what else to call it. It was large enough for the built-in shelves to each side, and still had room for the ice machine in the back. It was another purchase from the closed-down Streak house that had furnished so much of the rest of my kitchen, and had up to now mostly supplied ice packs after my workouts since I hated using the little short tube-shaped ice it made in my drinks. They just broke up too quickly, then you had to spit or blow them out of the way when you wanted to take a sip of your drinks without the bits blocking your lips. Unless you used a straw, which no adult should. They suck, heh, good one. I will have to remember that and wait for the chance to use it on the grandkids. Puns are a joke, best served cold. After filling the cooler with pop, in the plastic one, and hard cider and beers, the old green one, Aaron's job became more symbolic as I had to hold the green cooler in place with one hand on its handle as I pulled the plastic cooler by its fold-up arm. Still the boy was putting all of his 3 foot some inches of muscles into helping the top one stay in place. With a victorious grin on his face as we got it out of the kitchen, down the 2 patio steps, almost lost it there, and out under the tarp. About an hour later, after being scolded into having Dare help me get the other patio table outside so we have somewhere to set out the food, condiments, silverware, and still having somewhere to sit, we finally dined. The kids got sad at the outdoor patio table and proceed to get my twin-sized bed sheet thoroughly filthy with spills and stains, while the adult convened at the picnic table. We kept the conversation light while we ate. Jobs. Retired, sheriff, deputy, lawyer, and Dare managing the used bookstore. Not a long-term business anymore. If it wasn't for all the old wolves still preferring print copies of their books and hating getting shipping to their homes, I'd have to look for a new job. That got a stubborn look from his grandmother. I have no intention of ever closing that store. I helped my sister-in-law open it and 3 generations of our family have worked there, and I intend to see a 4th one as well. A look of realization came to her. Oh. Myrian turned his sister to cure her polio. If anyone complains about you turning your family, tell them to tell it to Sophia's children and grandchildren. She shook her head at herself. I've known her so long I don't think of her as someone who changed. I considered that. Just how many of the werewolves around here are related to you? Dare laughed and Adora actually blushed a little. Most of it's by marriage, my children and their stayed in the area, and many of the other families had become too closely related to each other. She gave me a sideways look. Something that is becoming a problem again. I think a lot of people would welcome some fresh blood around here. She pointedly looked from Deborah to Charles. Both seemed embarrassed, while Dare smirked at his roommate. Wait, did I miss something? As the kids were starting to become restless, I stood up as I waved the rest of the adults to keep their seats. The kids are getting bored, time to break out lawn games and let them get tired out. Dare got up anyways, a look of interest on his face, as he followed me into the garage. What all do you got? Are those darts? Are those even legal anymore? I glacéed at the lethal little lawn darts and considered. For sale, yeah, but it's more of some of the kids just being too young for me to get them out. Older kids are safe to use them if an adult is around to tell them not be stupid. Aaron and Mel are young enough to just end up running around and ending up in the wrong spot. I turned around to see all 4 kids looking in the open side door of the garage, the youngest girl, Mel, curiously asking, "What's a lawn game?" I tossed her a frisbee, an old blue flying saucer that was probably worth some cash nowadays. You throw this back and forth until one of you loses it in the lake or on the roof, then you fight over the tether ball. Mel looked at the frisbee with excited eyes and turned to run outside, the others following along, except for Sarah, who gave me a suspicious look, walked over the shelves and grabbed 2 smaller off-brand plastic throwing discs small enough for Aaron to be able to throw before heading out with one last glare at me. Dare gave me a curious look, to which I returned a shrug and then froze. Frisbees are basically a game of fetch. Was it insensitive to hand it to the girl who turns into a wolf? He laughed. Guess that means I'm in the clear. I carried out the tetherball, and then me and Dare got most of the way through a game before the kids ran over, asked questions, and complained about us taking too long. The 2 of us gave each other a look and wordlessly agreed to start hitting easy shots to each other to drag out the game to the kids' growing frustration. Ami figured it out first, and whined until Sarah began smacking the ball with her hand to shoot the ball around at an awkward angle to hurry the game around, with both of us adults now having to work at prolonging our turn, before the ball finally was driven all the way down the coil. Of course, we had never really decided which way each of us were supposed to be playing for, having just been messing around, but the girls still declared Dare the winner and demanded the paddles. Wait, why is he the winner? Give that back, me and him have to play real game. My protests were ignored and I was off to collect the making for Molly. Dare rejoined the conversation at the picnic table while the girls argued behind me and yelled at their giggling brother. No, Aaron. You can't grab the ball while we're playing. Stop it. I got the Dutch oven, a heavy metal pot with little legs on the bottom, a handle that went over the top of the pot, and a heavy lid with a ridge around the rim, from the garage and carried it over to the kitchen. I had managed to get most of the ingredients out before Adora came wandering and watched me silently, with a growing look of concern on her face as I sprayed cooking oil into the Dutch oven and then dumped in a medium-sized jar of apple jelly. I had decided not to experiment with both the jelly and peanut butter. From there I added in 3 sliced-up apples, peels and all, then the cinnamon, nutmeg, and finally the yellow cupcake mix. I topped that off with several slices of butter, the brown sugar, then a can of off-brand lemon lime soda. She finally broke down and asked, "What is that going to be?" I gave her a questioning look as I set the lid on top. "Molly?" She followed me out and had a seat on the picnic table again as I knocked around the coals in the barbecue and set the pot in the middle, then started picking up hot coals with tongs and setting them on top. Behind me, I could hear Charles giving her the same answer of Molly when she tried questioning him. The smell was enough to get a sweaty, overexcited little werewolf girl, followed shortly the rest of the youngsters, over to look at me and the Dutch oven in curiosity and to begin asking a lot of questions. "What's that? Are you cooking something? Why are the coals on top? What's Molly? Dutch oven. Molly. So it cooks from all sides. Bring out some ice cream, bowls, and spoons, and you can find out." That, and Mel dragging on both of the girls' arms, got them moving. It didn't taste exactly right. Normally I would have used pie filling. But it was hot and sweet, and the ice cream gave it a nice contrast. After that, the younger girl and Aaron were getting sleepy, the bugs were coming out, and I was quickly informed citronella and werewolves did not get along. Deborah explained. "The smell is just too strong." So surprisingly, werewolves are not a hangout outside in the evening kind of people. I wouldn't have guessed. After the deputy insisted I keep and finish off the potato salad, I promised to clean and return the bowl. Then she and her roommate were off to put a little wolf girl to bed. For all of the 6 hours, wolf girl would be asleep before being up the rest of the night. Adora stayed behind and began helping me to clean up while the girls helped, and Charles supervised the boy as he got his promised chance to burn as many twigs as he wanted. After the cleanup, Charles volunteered to help get the kids to bed, to all three's protests. While me and the sheriff sat close enough to the fire to keep away the worst of the bugs. I offered her another cider, wondering how much being a werewolf changed your limits on drinking and driving. As I had a seat, I decided I would keep my limit to 2 drinks and at least an hour break before getting behind a wheel. Things may have changed for me, but it still wasn't just my life I would be placing at risk by testing that particular new limit. "So which world war did you meet your husband in?" "Yeah, that's it." "Smooth." That got a laugh. "I'm not that old. I will not give you my exact age, but I was just a girl when I met Darian, and since I aged so much slower than him, he was stuck with a child bride for years." She smiled to herself. He always had a sense of humor about it, bragging about having a young wife right up until he drifted off one night. I got a glance. I will always love him, but my life was not over with him gone. She finished off her drink and got up. I joined her, because that's what you're supposed to do when a lady stands up. "I think I've drank a little too much to drive home, so I hope you don't mind if I stay the night." She began heading into the house. "You should join me after you put out the fire." Charles stepped out just in time to step out of her way as she headed inside. I was following close behind, really hoping I had read that invitation right. Aaron is in bed. He was too tired to argue too much. The other 2 talked me into letting them watch a show before they went to bed. I nodded at him absent-mindedly. "Thanks a lot, Charles, for everything, but if you do me one more solid and kill the fire for me, I would really owe you one." I didn't wait for an answer as I began to head into the house. It was as awkward as any other 2 people getting together for the first time. It was also wonderful, and that is all I was going to say about it to anyone. I also had a lot of questions, like did she always move this fast, was this the start of something, or a one-time thing? Wisely, I didn't ask. Chances are she didn't know either, or would get upset if I asked for reasons that would only make sense to a woman. I half woke up early in the morning. Well, more like late that night anyways, as a familiar presence crossed the borders of my land. Recognizing the child from next door, I gave her a little growl that made her jump a bit in the air and made my overnight guest stir in her sleep before I relaxed and dozed off again. It wasn't until the next morning that I realized Mel had heard, or perhaps felt my growl from a few thousand feet away. Was that a me thing or a her thing? Charlie's alarm woke me up again, and I got out of bed to make sure I caught up to him before he made it to the door. Adora stirred from beside me and looked around. Is everyone in your family an early riser? I gave her a fond look. I think he's still planning to go into work today and wants to get an early start for the road. I threw on some cloths as Adora rolled out of her side and headed stark naked into my bathroom. I didn't want to stare, since I might be caught, so instead headed out to use the bathroom down the hall, washed my hands, then headed down to the kitchen to start up breakfast. Meat from the leftovers fried up with some microwaved potatoes in the frying pan, English muffins tossed in the toaster oven as I heard my nephew getting out of the shower, butter and jam set out for the muffins. Adora beat Charles downstairs as I was squeezing enough oranges for 3 small glasses. The kids would miss out, but that's what they get for being young enough to sleep for a whole night. The sheriff was back in her riding cloths, her overnight bag set down by the door as she looked around with a degree of awkwardness. Is there anything I can do? I guess she just needed something to do, either because that was just who she was, or maybe just because of last night. Maybe mix up some pancake batter. Meat and potatoes might be a bit heavy for an entire meal, and I don't want Charles drifting off on his ride home. She perked up, glanced at the greasy pan I was dishing out the potatoes from and went looking for a clean pan instead. What? This one was pre-greased, and it would add flavor to the pancakes. Meat flavor too, I would think a werewolf would love that. Charles wandered into the kitchen with a bemused look on his face at the sight of the food, the sheriff cooking, and started to say something with a smirk before I shut him up with a look. We had a brief stare down before he shrugged, stopped for a bottle of hot sauce I kept around for him in the fridge, and sat down before dousing his meat and potatoes with the stuff. Adora looked around as the smell hit her with an irritated look on her face, glanced at Charles happily munching down on his food, then gave me a questioning look. I shrugged back at her. I don't get it either. He can't possibly taste anything but the hot sauce, and he puts it on everything. No one knows where he got it from. He flipped me off. The traditional family salute. Adora laughed silently. We have some pancakes too, but if you put that stuff on them, I will arrest you. Charles just smiled at her and snagged the top and bottom of an English muffin. I'll have to pass, I love these, and I already overload on carbs. Upstairs, the smell of the various frying foods had gotten the 2 girls stirring from their beds, while their brother abruptly appeared as he wandered by me and awkwardly began to climb up to one of the tall chairs at the breakfast bar. Charles stopped stuffing his face long enough to help the boy up, while Adora gave me a look, as if for permission, before quietly asking the boy what he wanted to eat. The girls took long enough getting down for Aaron to eyeball the bottle of hot sauce, get to try a dollop of the stuff served up by his cousin, and decide he liked it. Great, another one. Charles finished his meal just as the girls wandered in, gave a surprised Sarah a hug, without getting hit, her sister one that she enthusiastically returned, and irritated Aaron with a pat on the head, before turning to me. So am I going to make arrangement for my dad to stop by for a bite? I thought that one over, and ultimately I just didn't want my brother to die for as long as possible, and most definitely not a slow death with cancer under the care of the Veterans Administration's political ineptitude. I nodded. Yeah. Bring him by, or I'll go see him. But, you figure out what to tell him in advance. He clenched his lips for a moment, and then nodded. I'll figure it out. With a nod to Adora, he started to head out, pausing as she held up a hand for him to wait. I must warn you, Mr. Lathe, if you do choose to become one of us as well, you might no longer be able to tolerate your favorite condiment, or at least will have to begin carrying around breath mints for the sake of the rest of us. She gave him a little smile to show she was joking, mostly, and he nodded in return with a thoughtful look as he headed out with the children's loud additional goodbyes. Well, the girls anyways, Aaron was busy pouring out dabs of hot sauce before each bite, experimenting to try to find just the right amount of the stuff for each bite. Guess I was going to have to stock up on the stuff. After a fairly small meal, she claimed any more would make her want to go back to sleep, and an affectionate goodbye kiss that got grossed out sounds from the kids, the girls, or a blank stare, the boy, Adora was off to work. Her hair had been damp when she came down, but I imagine even a shower wasn't going to be enough to keep the news she was knocking boots with the new guy from getting to every werewolf in town by noon. It had been a good night and looked to be a good day. I was planning on another shopping trip, this time with the kids in tow, getting in contact with their parents for an update and hopefully planning on having my entire family here for a few days while they figured out their next step. Then the kids' aunt finally caught up with them. I was getting an offended look from Sarah, and a mixed look of being both grossed out and intrigued from Ami as I sliced up the rest of a banana for Aaron to layer onto his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. My own sandwich had gotten some already since I thought adding some fruit to lunch would be healthy, and I was trying to be the responsible adult. Then Sarah started going on about it being too much sugar, and I felt the need to defy little Miss Know-It-All. The boy just liked to try new things, very unusual for a little kid. But no hot sauce, you put that stuff on a peanut and jelly sandwich and you are disinherited. Aaron looked confused. Ami piped in. That means you don't get any of his stuff after he dies. The boy looked at me in concern. Are you dying? Just as I was about to taunt the girl about worrying her sibling, I felt someone on my land. It wasn't like the solid push I felt when any of the werewolves came here, or the mushy presence of normal humans, but a feeling like a storm had just rolled in. I noticed the boy looking around, then turned toward the direction of the front gate. Auntie. There was a lot of mixed feeling wrapped up in that one word. Both the girls seemed to perk up for a moment before looking at each other in dismay. Auntie, as in your aunt that burned down your house, auntie? I dug out my phone and started bringing up the security camera app. Ami was starting to panic. Sarah stood up on the sideways support of the tall stool she had been sitting on to make herself taller while using the breakfast bar to keep her balance. She's a witch like Ami, but she knows what she's doing, don't let her turn this into a fight. That's what she always tries to do when you don't let her have things her way. I didn't know what words to pick. If she tried to hurt the kids, but she's their aunt, why would she hurt the kids? If she did? Could I stop her? Would I even try, knowing that this is someone who could hurt me, even now? Yeah. Hell yeah. I would stop her if she tried to touch my kids. No matter what. Wait, when did they become my kids? On the phone I could see a newish-looking kind of sport car, one of those new models that had the modern all sort of looking the same thing going on. Whoever the driver was, she was creeping the car slowly up the drive in a series of slow stops. Until she finally rolled up to right in front of the gate and I could see her on the camera. All unaware as she lifted up her sunglasses to try to peer past the gate. That isn't your aunt, that's your grandmother, Brianna. It was as if she hadn't aged more than a year or two. I couldn't see the color of her hair in the black and white image. But her face, the paleness of her skin. It was still the same as when I had fallen in love with her all those years ago. Ami pulled my arm down so she could see the phone as well as the two girls crowded around me. Sarah shook her head. No, that's Aunt Rosario, well, Great Aunt Rosa really. Her and Grandma look like twins even if Aunt Rose is like 20 years younger. You might want to let her in before she gets impatient and does something to your gate to make it open. She usually breaks stuff when she does that. Sarah looked thoughtful. She might even have been breaking things deliberately. Huh. Maybe we should just try the intercom first. I pressed the button on my screen. Can I help you? Her head snapped around wildly and she lifted her hands up like she was about to take control of an invisible marionette. After a moment, she seemed to relax slightly and sneered at the camera she had finally noticed. I'm here for my niece, and the other two if they're here. So open this damned gate and let me in. I think I'm going to need you to declare your intentions before I can do that. The kids are here with their parents' permission, but I've been told you might be trying to take custody of them without their parents' consent. But just in case you're actually worried about them, how about some proof of life? Say hi, kids. Hi, Aunt Rose. Excited. Ami. Auntie. Rather cold. Aaron. Mom said you burned our house down. Annoyed. Sarah. The aunt looked chagrined. That was the fault of some guy claiming to be your uncle, he wasn't cooperating. Sarah sighed. You've met Uncle Dave over a dozen times, Aunt Rose. You even got him to take you back to your hotel once. I could see the blush even on the cheap security cam. He just gave me a ride, I didn't even invite him up. Did he make something up? Sarah shook her head, at someone who on the phone. I was glad to see that someone else did that, and decided to never tease her about it since she could blame it on the genetics she got from me. No, Aunt Rose, he never mentioned you, at all. I don't think you matter enough to him to even think about. The aunt looked taken aback, even I almost flinched as Sarah just stared coldly at the phone. She would glare at me for trying to tease her, but her aunt, this was calculated hostility. Note, never burn down Sarah's house, and don't push her too much to find out if the bar for truly being pissed off is set lower than that. The aunt shook her head and glared at the camera. This isn't a conversation we should be having over a speaker, let me in or I will let myself in. Then she turned her head forward and rolled up the tinted window. I looked at Sarah, so just letting her sit there. I was interrupted at the sound of her aunt beeping her horn and took a moment to turn off the microphone. And get more angry is just going to make it worse? The eldest grandchild shook her head. You can't play games with her grandpa, she used to getting her own way and she has the power to do it. I shrugged. Guess I gotta let her in then. I pressed the button to open the gate and headed outside to meet her from the front door, all three kids trailing along behind me. I'd guessed they would be safe enough, they were family. I'm not. I glanced over at Sarah. I'm guessing she has something to stop a bullet? Sarah's eyes went wide. Please don't shoot my Aunt Grandpa. I thought it over and nodded to her. Alright, but if she tries to set my house on fire, I'm seriously going to punch her. Right in the face. Even if she is a girl. My mother taught me not to hit girls, but she said if they come at truly intending to hurt you, put them down. Really? That got another eye roll? I had guessed right that Miss All-Powerful Witch would head to the front door instead of pulling up to where I kept my truck parked near the side door to the kitchen. That door was for family, friends, and people I had invited to my home. She was none of those. She was already barking orders as she pulled up in front and popped out of her car. Ami, get in the car. Sarah, you and the boy can stay if you want, or you can get in the back. Your choice. I would have told her off right then and there, but for a moment, I was just frozen. In shock at those old feelings and memories. This was Brianna, but it wasn't. She seemed shorter, and by more than just a few inches. Her hair was darker too, I think. It had been over 45 years since I had seen her, but this wasn't her. Even her voice was different. Brianna was never so shrill, no matter how upset I had gotten her. Don't look at him, I'm your aunt, and if your dad isn't here, you listen to me. Rosario, now a different person in my mind, was now glaring, red-faced, at my younger granddaughter while pointing at her rental. Ami, get in the car. Right. Now. Right, that's enough of that. Miss, I would appreciate it if you would calm down and speak in a civil tone when talking to my granddaughter, and in any case you should be speaking to me since their parents have left them in my care. That shut her up, for a second. After staring at me blankly for a moment, she began sputtering before she got out. You're nothing but a dead man once my mother finds out Bree contacted you. And you are not their grandfather, you're just some guy that knocked up my sister. Then her voice went all weird. So just go inside and rest, old man. Well, a nap did sound good, so I shuffled around and started heading back inside. Maybe a snack first? Who's pulling on my arm? Why is Ami yanking on my sleeve? Go ask your sister Ami, I'm really tired. Why is she yelling lazy eight, round and round? Oh yeah. The figure 8, on its side, spinning round, and around until it crosses itself, with a twist, a flat ribbon in a circle. Outside in, and inside out. Things began to get a bit clearer. What did that witch do to me? I turned, the bones in my arm going hot as I pushed Ami behind me and pointed my now clawed furry finger at her aunt just as she was stepping up to grab Ami and drag her off. Bene Gesserit witch. Okay, maybe not the best time for a science fiction quote. But I was digging my way up from somewhere deep in my head, and it just sort of came out. And utterly confused all three girls for like half a second, which wasn't enough time for me to think of anything clever to do since mentally I still wasn't quite there. For one thing, I hadn't even been thinking about changing my hand, and my newest concern was what if I had changed the hand that I had just used to snag Ami behind me with into a weapon and had hurt her. Nope, thank God, just the same old withered skin and roughly trimmed fingernails. As I began to lower and change my my weaponized hand back to normal, the witch suddenly realized what she was up against. Holy crap! A werewolf. Sleep. I felt something hit the lazy 8 in my mind and start to slide off to one side even as it began to push its way through. Up until I focused on spinning the twisted strip faster and faster, keeping it a flat twisted ribbon in my head, until what had to be a spell slipped away entirely to the side. For a second I glanced down at the two kids to make sure I hadn't pushed it toward one of them somehow. But they looked fine, the two of them. Two. I began looking around for the boy, only to see him off to one side poking at Ami's phone. When had he gotten a hold of that? Sarah saw something in her aunt panicked look as the witch danced back and brought up her hands. She got between us and shouted, "Don't hurt my grandpa," and then her aunt was flying back from my granddaughter who stood in front of me with her hand thrust out flat in front of her. I could see the side of the car buckling in before the witch hit it. Glass shattering, airbags going off, and metal crumpling as the car slid back with Auntie never quite coming into contact with it until she hit the ground flat on her butt and slid the last few inches into the side of the wrecked car with a stunned look on her face, which quickly became one of shock. Sarah. You hit me? Then anger. Sarah, you hit me. Sarah shuffled her feet and closed her hand into a fist. Dad told me to hit you with everything I had if I even thought you were going to hurt my family. She jerked her head towards me, he's family. I felt really touched at that. More than you anyways. Okay. A little less touched now. The witch got up, mad as hell. I could feel something pressing down on my land as two little red balls of light swelled into existence in her hands. Then Aaron walked up to her and held up Ami's phone. Dad want to talk to you, Auntie. She stared at the boy. I stared at the boy. Sarah sighed and Ami yelled. Hey, that's my phone. I could hear my kid's voice calling from the phone and sounding pretty pissed off. Rosie. We need to talk about my house. The little fireballs vanished as the witch rolled her eyes and signed in exasperation as she took the phone. What? I know you have insurance and you always claimed you weren't materialistic. I crept up a little to hear better, getting a dirty look from the witch in return. You burned up everything. Clothes. Pictures. Our computers. Paperwork. Keepsakes. The witch's voice, already shrill, became distinctively whiny. It wasn't my fault, your wife's uncle threatened me. After you used the voice of Mesmer on him, and he was warning you not to use magic on him. You're the one that turned it into something violent by throwing a fireball at him. In my house. She lowered the phone for a moment as she looked up at the sky while shaking her head. Sarah relaxed a little but kept a readied stance, as I shook my hand around trying to get it to go back to normal. I wasn't trying to hit him with the first one, and I didn't think it was going to do more than scorch something in your kitchen a little. It was your wife's fault for having a bunch of weeds everywhere. That doesn't make it better. And those were herbs. And her name is Yuki. Maybe you should remember to start using it since you're going to have to apologize to her. She glared at the phone. As if. You know, I can just buy you a new house, And it's not like your strip mall development house was anything special. There was some sputtering from the phone. It was my home, not just a house. We had memories there. She began rocking her head side to side. Whatever. Besides, your daughter just slammed me into my car and totally crushed it. So we're even. You only drive rentals, it's not the same. Which one? The witch looked over at a now nervous Sarah. Sarah. Ami surprised me, I didn't have to suppress her at all. Oh, and your sperm donor is a werewolf. Thanks for warning me, and why didn't the mesmer work on him? They're supposed to all be vulnerable to mind control? My son hesitated. No clue. How far did she launch you? The witch again glared at the phone, like a few dozen feet. What difference does it make? There was a murmur of voices on the other side. Well, Dave says she's must have been sandbagging with him when she's been training, so he doesn't push her that hard. Sarah flinched, and her aunt smirked at her. Well, it's not unusual for young girls to flare up in power when they get emotional, as you well know. She got a wide grin on her face. That's why Mom needs to be training Ami herself right now. As far as Sarah is concerned. She gave my granddaughter a gloating look. I was threatening her dear granddaddy, and she must love him so much. The little girl got all upset and all flustered. She just lost control. Sarah began stomping toward her aunt, and got 3 steps toward her before she stopped with her fists clenched at her side and began whispering to herself. Round and round, over and under. The aunt looked disappointed as her nephew berated her on the phone. What are you, 12? This is your niece Rosario. Be the adult. She went back to talking on the phone. Look, Junior, this is women's business. I promise I won't burn anything down, but you aren't here, and I am, as you said, the aunt. I get to decide what happens with Ami right now, and you can talk to my mom about it later. She gave the phone a dirty look as my son yelled on the other end, and his voice was cut off as the phone shot out some sparks before she threw it to the ground and ground it under her heel. Ami looked outraged. My phone. The witch flinched and held her hand out in a stop motion at Ami. Whoops. Sorry, Ami, I'll buy you a new one. Ami looked sad, to the point even I could tell it was mostly faked. It was a gift and I just got it. She began sniffling up. Her aunt now, and only now, looked guilty. I said I was sorry. Ami looked at her. Then promise me no fighting. She sniffed again, and threw in a lip tremble. A look of realization dawned on face of the witch. You little brat, you playing me? Me? All right, no promises, but I'll at least try talking. She glared at me. As long as Baron Harkonnen there doesn't start anything. She crossed her arms and muttered to herself. They weren't even really witches, they were like nuns or something. Well, if I had to deal with a flame-throwing rabid feminist witch, at least it was a well-read one. I looked around at the children, then the witch. So if the spells and property damage is all done with, maybe we can sit down inside and talk about it. But before we could get started, my phone started blowing up with multiple calls. First off, an incoming call from Silvery Moon. Hi Adora, I'm guessing the neighbors had a noise complaint? Adora sounded concerned, and a little guarded. Sadly, it seemed that even now, she was still not entirely sure about me. John, are you all right? Your grandchildren? Yep. Just the girls establishing a pecking order. That got a confused look on the aunt's face that turned into an annoyed look as Sarah smirked at her. I could hear the look she would have been giving me. Really? Oh right, don't keep the new woman in my life in the dark. Sorry, old habit. The kid's aunt, the fully trained witch, stopped by and well. I glanced over at the witch who stared back at me as she crossed her arms. Well, I want to say this in the best way, since she's looking right at me. I guess let's just say her and Sarah had a little confrontation over their aunt taking Sarah's wishes into account instead of treating her like she was just a little kid still. And a rental car got caught up in it. No one was hurt, but I just realized it's leaking oil all over my driveway and I really need to get some cardboard under it to soak it up. So gotta go, no need for the cops. You shouldn't come up here, gotta go, bye. I was really hoping here that Adora was as smart as she had shown herself to be. She was the one who had warned me about werewolves being susceptible to outer magic types using mind control spells. So mentioning the fully trained witch should have been something she should pick up on. Which would either keep her away, or have her camped out across the lake with a few friends with scoped rifles ready to take down the wicked witch. I didn't really have enough of a feel for how she thinks to take a guess yet. I glanced at the phone as it rang again and saw that it was my son trying to get through now. Sarah, I really do want to get some cardboard under the car, so you talk to your dad. I tossed her the phone and headed off for the garage. Ami, give you aunt a tour or something. I had more than enough room in my house to have stored all the moving boxes, but I was nervous about filling up a room with cardboard. You know, fire hazard and all. All it would take is just one spark. So everything had ended up torn down and folded up flat, then stacked up in one corner out in the cheaper to repair or replace if burned to ashes garage. Since ID had never drained out an entire oil pan onto cardboard, I decided to risk overestimating and grabbed a stack of about 8 or so former boxes and headed back to the car. Where the witch was still standing around outside listening to Ami excitedly telling her about the big fireplace in the attic ballroom. The aunt looked at me and narrowed her eyes in some look I couldn't read as I headed over and got down on my knees to look under the car. The car had slid back far enough to hit up against the cement rim on the inner circle of the drive that turned it into a huge planter. Fortunately, it looked like the car was only dripping some fresh-looking oil. So the puddle wasn't that big or dark. Even if there wasn't an affordable way to get the stain out of the cement, it wasn't going to be too bad. Maybe I could just paint over it or something? Sarah wandered over. Dad wants to talk to you, I grunted back at her. Tell him everyone's okay, and I'll call him back. I slid the first bit of cardboard under the leak. The next piece on the stack had a shiny finish, maybe put it below the first sheet to stop anything that soaked though, and keep the absorbent stuff on top. I heard a sigh, and then she was kicking me, not hard, more to make sure I was really listening. He wants to talk to you, Kick. His dad, who he just now finally got to meet. Kick, who just got put in danger because his other family came looking for his children. Kick. Oh. I glanced up at the girl and saw a look of I don't know. Something emotional I don't think either of us could fit into one word. Family, huh? I took the phone. Hi kiddo, I'm sure Sarah filled you in. She's being pretty insightful right now, and totally did a warrior princess thing. Complete with a dramatic, slow closing of her fist. Sarah's eyes went wide and her entire face flushed. I looked her in the eye and mouthed the word, cardboard, and jerked my head at the car. She looked away from me and began kicking the entire stack under car. Sheesh. It probably only needed 1 or 2 more sheets to do the job. It's like the girl thinks I'm made out of money. I heard someone laughing in the background. That's great, Dad, but are you okay? Are you safe? I can't get there in time to do anything, but if you can keep her there until it gets dark, I got people who owe me favors and can get there pretty soon after sunset. So, a vampire? The closet ones I knew of were from the Red Smart. No, I think. She's feeling pretty civil right now, and when I sit down with her, I'll call you, and your wife, and put you on speakerphone. Worst comes to worst, are the kids in any danger from your aunt or grandmother? No, not in danger. But once her mother gets a hold of Ami, there is no way she will ever let her go. And Yuki's great-grandfather will go to war over her. I don't want my child's legacy to be the blood of her family. Yuki's or mine. And that includes yours. He sighed. I just thought I was done with Endora and her madness. Wait. Endora? Endora Kane? Who the hell is your grandmother, a bewitched fangoth girl? Really? Apparently I was a bit too loud since the aunt began yelling at me loud enough I could hear her over my son's surprised laughter, as well as the whooping laugh of whoever was listening in. She was only allowed to read the Bible when she was a kid, and she didn't want to keep the name her father gave her, or his family name. And she picked it like 200 years before that show. That gave me a pause. 200 years. How powerful was she? Ami could toss around a few hundred pounds of door frame out of the side of a house for over 20 feet. Untrained. But unless age weakened witches, and training helped. I'm thinking, let's not make Endora come looking for her grandchildren. Dad, you still there? Oh yeah, the kid. Yeah, so I'm okay. We're going to have a nice sit down and get everyone settled, then I'll call you back in 20 minutes or so. Got it, I'll let you go. I sighed. Checked on the job Sarah did with the cardboard. Saw that it was good enough, if wasteful. Gave her a nod and tried for a pat on her head. She dodged, but was too worried about the situation to even bother glaring at me. Then I turned to the witch. Miss Kane, please come in. I brushed off my knees from getting down in the broken glass to look under the car. Then I walked to the front door. Ami? Could you and Aaron take your aunt to the front parlor while me and Sarah get some drinks? Pulling open the front door, I shifted to the side to hold the door for the ladies, and saw a look of confusion on the middle child's face. It's the one with the IKEA furniture with the dark blue upholstery. Then I had to clarify that a bit more for the tween. The stuff that looks like it's made out of old packing crates, with the blue cushions. She perked up and nodded. Oh, you mean the living room. Come on Auntie, I can show you the pool on the way there, it's got plants growing all around it, and rainbow fish. I tried to correct her. They're betta fish. But she was already off, dragging her aunt behind her with Aaron trailing along slowly behind them. Looking off down the hall they had gone down, and pointedly not as my eldest granddaughter, for once not wanting to embarrass her. I said in a simple, level tone. I'm proud of you. She made some kind of sound that I didn't have a word for, sort of pleased and questioning at the same time. If me and your aunt had gotten into it, one or both of us would have ended up hurt. Maybe hurt bad, or worse, one or more of you three may have gotten caught up in it. I finally looked down at her, to see her looking the other way rather than let me see her face at the moment. Or even my house. She turned to shoot me a resigned look, still red-faced, but letting out a sigh in exasperation. You stepped up and took on the responsibility to stop a fight. You used just enough force for your aunt to realize she wasn't going to be able to push you around. All without hurting her. Other than her wallet. I don't see her as the type to pay for the insurance. That got me a little bit of a grin. I put an arm around her shoulder and pulled her in a bit as I started to lead her to the kitchen. All too wise, she grabbed hold of that hand to make sure I wasn't able to go for her hair when I later stepped away. But she didn't pull away, instead, she vented a bit. She always has to have it her way, and she and my dad get into these shouting matches. But Mom just says it's like when me and Ami argue because they grew up together, even in the same house for a while. She's my aunt, but... I gave her a squeeze. Family. You got to love them, even if you don't like them. Thinking that over, I added. But at some point you can decide not to put up with them anymore. There are limits, even for family. I let her pull away when we go to the kitchen. The hall was wide enough for two people to walk side by side, but the kitchen entrance, even if it was pretty wide itself, would have been a tight squeeze. She kept a firm grasp on my hand as she stood clear, almost to the point of putting me into an arm lock. Such a distrustful child. Can't imagine why. At some point you might want to get together with her, just the two of you rather than a family gathering, and let her start to get to know you as just you. Not part of a package with your dad. I began looking around the kitchen. You can decide for yourself if she is worth knowing as a person instead of just family. I heard her come up behind me and pause. So what are you looking for? I waved my hand in the vague direction of the big closet between the kitchen and the hallway. I picked up a silver tea set. I seemed like something a mansion needed, but I got no idea how to serve tea. Plus the tea bags I got are pretty old. I only really drink it when I got a sore throat. She walked over to the fridge. You're going to want to serve everything in sealed containers. Bottled water, packaged food. It's how these things are done, according to my mom. Dad doesn't talk about it. I guess so no one can poison stuff? But I could put out stuff for me and you three, right? The adrenaline was clearing from my system, and I could use some sugar to settle things. She considered it, and finally nodded. I guess it would be acceptable if it's something sealed when we sit down, and then you eat from it first. She smirked. Like that's going to be a problem. I shot her a look, which she ignored. What? Oh. I lost weight as got I older. I think mostly muscle mass, but maybe some bone density. I think I'm so hungry all the time because my body is trying to build me up again to be healthier. She gave me a long stare, then slowly nodded. That kind of makes sense, but if that's true, you should be eating healthier food. Not all that junk food. Shoot, she may have a point, but still I ain't in that much of a hurry. That got a very unladylike snort out of her. But she was right, and now that her aunt had tracked her down, a vampire had sent some goons after me, and some of the locals may not all be friendly. And someone may come looking for me and mine if I start offering around a lycanthropic cure-all, maybe getting into fighting trim sooner than later. It was something to think about. Later. From the closet I retrieved the worked silver serving tray, onto which Sarah plunked down some of the little white plates that had come with one of the sets of dining where I had picked up at a garage sale, and had never found much use for. So small. Along with some matching silverware, the stainless steel kind I had gotten from my grandparents, and some paper towel sheets folded in half. She gave me a look as she placed down the paper towels as napkins. What? A package of cookies with some apple goop in the middle, the only ones not yet opened, a couple of water bottles and several drink boxes from the fridge completed the tray. Sarah only put 2 of the drink boxes at first, hesitated, then added several more. I didn't ask. She took the tray before I could, and headed for the parlor. Setting the tray down on the big flat-topped chest meant to be used as a coffee table. I took a water bottle for herself, opened the cookies, and took a big bite out of one after she sat down. Her aunt hesitated, then took an apple juice drink box along with a cookie, which was apparently the signal for the other 2 kids to descend on drinks and snacks. I hadn't even sat down yet, as the 2 of them, great aunt and grandniece, stared each other down. Does Sarah even realize she had taken on the role of hostess? Is this something her mom trained her to do, or is this all Sarah acting on instinct? Whatever was happening, her aunt looked like she was taking the girl even more seriously than after she got knocked on her butt. I was so wrapped up in how proud I was, and Sarah was so intent on watching her aunt's every move, that Ami had to remind us to call their parents. Huh? Oh yeah. Them. Look at me, Mr. Smooth. I made the call and put it on speaker. Dad? Nodding at the phone, I filled him in. We're sitting down, we have broken the bread and shared water, well apple juice anyways. Which makes her a guest and safe in my house by the ancient laws. We can talk now. That got me in. Is that some kind of werewolf thing? Question from another guy on the line who was also somehow invited to a family meeting. While Rosario's eyes widened a little before she looked down at the juice box she had just taken a sip of to wash down a bite of cookie. I hesitated over a juice box myself. Who doesn't like cider? Before cracking open a water bottle. Took a deep gulp of it, then snagged another cookie for myself. I think I may have needed to put some salt on them too for authenticity, but I figured the preservatives had to include some, so good enough. So let's talk. The kid, my son, opened up the conversation. Rose, I'm not sending my 11-year-old daughter all alone to that woman. We also both know I'm not welcome there. The witch nibbled at her cookie and smirked as she made my son wait for her answer, up until she realized everyone else in the room was looking at her. Wide-eyed, she hastily swallowed. So maybe not totally rude, just used to messing with my boy. I guess they were. Like brother and sister. She needs to be trained Johnny, and my mom is the best around. Plus she's got the whole local coven to fill in for her when she's busy. Or when Ami just needs a break from her. Even she knows how she is, and the mistake she made with your mom. That got a brief silence from everyone. As well as some questions I hope to get answers to one day, without having to actually ask. She's my daughter Rose. I'm not giving her up. Can't you and Mom just teach her? The witch shook her head. Mom won't believe I'll do the job right. She gritted her teeth as she said it. And your mom is still excommunicado. There is no way the witch queen is going to let anyone else train her granddaughter other than her, let alone the rebel daughter. While my boy was mulling that over, his wife spoke up. My family had their own magic workers once. That got a curious look from the witch. 7 generations of writing and rituals from our family. In addition, that witch was won, bought, or taken as prizes from other lines. All available to an outer magician of our line. We would never share such with an outsider. But the head onmyoto of the family has the discretion to share the resources entrusted to them. Say with a beloved teacher related to her by blood. Say, like a trusted aunt who seeks to impress her own elders, or rise above a rival. Rosaria Kane narrowed her eyes as she stared at the phone, the straw of her drink box forgotten on her lips. Oh, you're good. My daughter-in-law, who I now a little scared of meeting, continued. Of course such documents would not be available outside of our family's home, at least not unless our child was there, as the rightful guardian of the Red Room. Maybe once she was of age, she would be free to share? But by then, she might have grown very resentful of anyone involved in taking her away from her family at such a young age. She paused. And angry. With access to 2 cultures' worth of mystic knowledge. My Ami did not get her father's hair, but she can have the temper of a redhead, along with your family's ability to hold a grudge. The witch set her drink box down on the table and turned in her seat to face a wide-eyed Ami. Are you in for this, Ami? Will you share everything of your inheritance with me if I take your side? If I act on your behalf? The way she spoke made it sound like the words had some weight to them. Something ritual. And, I noted, did not mention the grandmother. This was a private agreement. Ami licked her lips nervously. Looked at the phone, which remained quiet. Her parents letting her make this decision. She looked to her sister, to me, and then to Aaron as he laid his hand on hers as she clenched at her leg. Finally, she looked to her aunt. If you treat me like family? Like me, and my parents and my grandfather treat their family? She nodded to herself. Then I will treat you like family, and families help each other. The witch looked a little taken aback, but after a moment started to nod, only to have the tiny little girl raise her hand in a stop motion, and look a little uncertain. And you have to be nicer to my grandma. She's used to how you treat her. But I hate it when you're so mean. I don't think I can trust someone who's so mean to their sister, just to make some old witch happy. Rosaria looked a bit stunned, while Yuki sounded alarmed and upset. Ami Rose Kane. You do not call your great-grandmother an old witch. Show respect. My son was too busy laughing to say anything. But his aunt? Did I have that right? She had a nervous little grin on her face. I think your great-grandmother would love if you called her an old witch. She is old, and a witch. And she would rather have some cheek from you rather than have you half paralyzed with fear. She leaned forward and held up a finger in warning. Just don't overdo it, or call her that in front of any men, even your father. If we pull this off, then me and your grandmother will teach you as a child, but at some point you will want to study with my mother. If for no other reason than others looking down on you for passing up the opportunity. Ami thought that over and quickly began to nod. The witch pulled the phone closer to her. So what did you have in mind? My mom isn't willingly going to let anyone but herself teach her. She also isn't going to lower her pride to walk into someone else's stronghold like a potential hired tutor, or let someone else's family keep her like a pet. My son spoke up again. Not the nicest way of putting things, Rosie. Rosario stuck her tongue out at the phone. Mom is far from being nice, Johnny, and you know that's exactly like how she would see it. I had a possible solution, or at least a step toward it. But I had held off on saying it in the hope someone would come up with something else. Nope. Yuki had the same idea. What if we could get both sides of the family talking to each other, face to face? Somewhere neutral, but still interested in the best outcome for Ami. The witch thought that over and began looking around the room as she realized what my daughter-in-law meant. A man-hating witch, and a mystic warrior, grandfather of assassins, not a ninja. Both set in their own ways like most old people, but with a few hundred years old of attitude added on. Each. And I had only been worried about a visitor setting my house on fire. My son decided to be the one to outright ask me, "Dad, are you going to be okay with this?" It would have been nice to have a chance to think it over, but I had 4 sets of eyes, one of them pleading, all looking at me. I sighed and ran my hand through my hair. I just got the place, and anyone else. Well, anyone else I could now toss out on there, but if they started trouble, but from what I've heard of those two. Seeing the disappointment beginning to emerge the younger girl's eyes, I decided to give in. Worst came to worst. I had a lot of insurance on the place, its contents, and both a lawyer in the family as well as enough money to make it clear that I could afford to fight my insurance company as long as it took for my payout. In full, with penalties. The place is yours for as long as you need it, Ami. For whatever reason. I always meant this to be a place for my family, but I had been thinking more in terms of a holiday and vacation spot. Not the grand conclave of the 2 dynasties. I waved my finger at her. Next time you want to have guests over, make it a sleepover or something. She rushed over to throw herself into a hug. Her little back all bony under my hands, her tiny heart beating away. She was way too young and small to have to bear up under the pressure of 2 families. The first witch of her generation, in the line of a witch queen, whatever that meant. Then the weight of her entire other family's hopes. Me, I would just have to be the one to offer my help rather than burden her. If I was to lose my home because of the ill tempers of one or both of the old gits, so be it. I only had this place due to the interference of the girl's grandmother. Easy come, easy go, and I still had plenty of money for a more conventional home. I heard an electronic click and looked over to see the aunt with her phone out taking a picture. She grinned up at me and then looked to her startled niece. "I'm sending you a copy, Ami." She didn't offer one for me, but I could finagle a copy later. I certainly wasn't going to ask. I addressed the room. "So how are we going to go this?" My son must have already been readying a plan. Very slowly. Rose will talk to her mother and tell her about the bribe to try to sell her on at least coming to a meeting, since talking itself concedes nothing. While Yuki will work on her great-grandfather, since nothing can move forward without anyone talking to each other. We will be coming there so no one can claim that leaving them with you isn't enough protection, or that they have a greater claim to guardianship. That got the kids excited. They had gotten used to me, but I wasn't their mom or dad. I admit I was a little excited as well. Also, nervous. My kid, but not a child. It had been easy for the kids to get used to me. Children just want to be loved. But other than the kids, what real tie would this man have with me? I was just the guy who knocked up his mom and looked after his kids for a while. Now he was coming to stay with me. Would he think me an old fool for how I had spent this money, or worse? Would he see me as the old man that he just had to wait out a few years to get a fat payday? Even worse. Was he going to have a get-together here with all the warring faction, and then take these kids out of my life? Or even just up and vanish to protect them from both families? What if that was the best thing for them? My son was still talking. "Rose, make sure you tell your mother about John being a werewolf, and that I told you to tell her. She knows that I know they can be mesmered pretty easily, and it will drive her crazy that I want her to know he's vulnerable. Trying to figure out why I wanted her to know might be enough to get her here all by itself. Both your mom and Yuki's clan head will want to make demands to throw their weight around setting this up, which means we might be able to drag this out until Ami is old enough to drive. And the older she is, the less they can mess with her head if they get a hold of her." He paused. "Is it going to be okay for me to show up their dad? I don't want to assume, and I know this had got to be, all sort of tangle up in your head as badly as it is for me." "Heh, we'll figure it out as we go, son. It's not like I would ever turn you away. Maybe make an overly emotional welcome to embarrass you in front of your kids just to mess with you. But no rejection. He laughed. Seriously, you're not going to do anything to make it weird, are you? I ginned at the phone and slowly shook my head. No. No. Just a steady handshake after your kids calm down a bit. It's not like I'm going to put up a banner or something. Call me back when you have some details. I reached over to the phone. I'm going to take you off speaker and let you talk to the witch. I pressed the button to return the phone to normal and handed it off. You caught us at lunch, so I'm going to take the kids back to the kitchen to finish eating. When you're done talking to my son, please bring the phone to the kitchen so they can say goodbye. Ami crept in for another hug, so I kind of had her attached to my hip as I led the parade out. Sarah gave a suspicious look to her aunt, before she reluctantly followed along as Aaron took her hand to lead her out. Sorry kiddo, but they can't really have a serious conversation about you with you still in the room. She gave me a surprised look, which quickly turned to one of concern. You really think they're going to talk about me? Wait, are you messing with me? Seriously, am I going to be in trouble? I made a dismissive sound and waved my hand at her. Don't worry about it. I can have you do chores to pay off the damage to the car. You could have it all paid off by Christmas. She glared at me, but I could tell she was still concerned. I made a mental note to let her off the hook before bedtime. I wanted her distracted, not obsessing. The girls just nibbled at their now slightly dried out sandwiches. Aaron tucked into his peanut butter, jelly, and banana. Mine was a little unpleasantly cooled off. The peanut butter had lost the heat from the formerly freshly toasted bread, and the jelly had lost its chill. Still good, but now I had the lack of perfection to blame on the witch as well. I reached out to nudge the girls' plates at them for emphasis. Eat. Stress burns blood sugar, and I don't want you two all mopey for the rest of the day. We got a shopping trip into town after we drive your aunt back to the airport. The aunt in question wandered in at that point, still talking on my phone. Okay Johnny, here's your kids. Oh no, both the girls have mouthfuls of food, so I'll have to put Aaron, who has jelly all over his face, on the line first. Both the girls made muffled sound of protest as she handed the phone off to the sticky-fingered boy. I would have approved of the teasing, but it was my phone now getting covered in grape jelly. A conversation ensued about the merits of sliced fruit on sandwiches as the aunt grinned at her two glaring nieces. I tried to be a good host. So. We still got all the sandwich stuff out if you want to help yourself. She looked everything over with an air of superiority, then brightened up. Oh, is that provolone? My mom found out she's lactose intolerant, now that there's a term for it, and has forbidden all dairy products in her house. And I'm away too often to keep any groceries at my place. She wiggled in between me and the counter while reaching for the bread. Can you get me a plate? A please would have been nice. Also, don't be rubbing your butt up against me, woman, I'm old, not dead. None of that was out loud, of course, and I did still get her a plate. I also wet down a paper towel and set it out between the girls, the younger ones, to use before their turn with the phone. Aaron kept glancing at his sisters to gauge how upset they were, but ultimately ran out of things to say to his dad, who told him to pass off the phone to his sister. I think he wanted to further tease the two of them since his dad didn't say which sister, but Sarah spoiled it for him by shaking her head and pointed at Ami. The middle grandchild managed to hang up the phone while trying to clean off the jelly, and started to lose her composure while wiping again and again to try to get the last of the stickiness off while it was ringing with her dad on the other end of the line. Look clean enough for me. It spins and crosses itself, kiddo, remember your training, then let me take the phone and tell your dad to wait while I finish cleaning it off. She let go of the phone reluctantly. Hey kiddo, got to wipe the screen clean, so let me call you back in a second. Jelly. I gave the witch a sharp look, to which she seemed oblivious as she ate mostly cheese sandwich. Giving the screen a last finger check for any last sticky spots, then again as I rubbed away at the one I found. I hit redial and passed the phone off to the middle child. who then skittered out of the room so no one could listen in. Sarah grabbed a few more paper towels, dabbed them under some water, and proceeded to begin cleaning off her brother's own sticky spots. There's a trick you have to learn to keep the banana slices in a peanut butter and jelly. The kid would master it in time, but until then it would require a change of clothes after each such meal. Which is what as Sarah left the room with her brother to go do, leaving me alone with the witch. I tried to stare her down, but it was a little hard to do with someone who showed no sign of stopping as she munched away at her sandwich. So, was that a deliberate stress test of Ami, or does getting her wound up just come natural? She gave me a surprised look and tried to quickly chew her last bite. Sorry. Let me get you something to drink. I grabbed another drink box from the fridge. She swallowed her bite and got the straw into the box, taking a sip before she finally gave me an answer. Sorry, I wind them up all the time. But getting the phone sticky wasn't a plan, I just like to favor Aaron when I can. My mom always put me ahead of John, and when I got older I felt a little guilty about it. I don't want him to ever think I'm going to do the same with his boy. She grinned. And I'm not going to walk on eggshells around Ami. She's going to lose control dozens of times over the next few years. Might as well have it happen at someone else's house. I took a second. You know, I can talk about how I'm as strong as Sarah, and have a lot less cause to hold back on you. I could brag about how I resisted your mind tricks. But I think you might be angling for another shot as me. So no, I'm not going to do any of that. While I started cleaning up a bit, I told her how I was going to deal with her. If you poke the bear too much, I'm going to tell on you to John. After a moment of letting her mull on that. You're on pretty thin ice with him as it is. It wouldn't take much for him to cut you out of any deal being made with your mom. You going to want another sandwich before I put this away? She shook her head no as I eyeballed the remaining half of Ami's sandwich, but I left it alone for the moment. I was still a bit hungry, but it was always best to be at least a little hungry before I went grocery shopping. Otherwise I wouldn't buy enough food because even now it killed me to buy anything when it wasn't on sale. Ami wandered back in to pass off the phone, only to find all her sibling absent. Sarah took the boy upstairs for a change of clothes. She nodded and turned to head upstairs, stopped, turned, then came in. Don't eat my sandwich. She actually wiggled her finger at me while shooting me a dark look before heading back out. The witch gave me questioning look. I shrugged. Don't know what she's talking about. Then she pulled the dish with the remains of her grandniece's lunch a symbolic distance away from me. Humph. Don't act like you know me. After a moment of silence, I tried to feel her out a little. I tried to find your sister. She didn't tell me about being pregnant, or leave me any clue why she left. I looked for her. Tried to track her down, but at some point it became clear to me I wasn't going to find her. She gave me a mixed look. Disinterest, with some hostility, and then bottoming out in consideration. I wasn't even conceived until after Brianna came home. Mom's second chance at the perfect heir. You were just kind of a placeholder in the story for me. Guy X who got my sister pregnant with what amounted to my brother who kept asking about you, while I was being told I had no father. The witch waved her hand around. Now you're somebody who is important to John and his kids, but for me you're just someone who I might see every now and then, and that only because you're going to be around them. I'm sorry you got cut out of their lives all this time, but I don't really have an interest in any of it. She shook her head. It's just not my problem or responsibility. You seem like a good guy, but I don't need to know, and would rather not get involved. Thanks for lunch, and the ride to the airport if the offer is still good. But you need to talk to Bree about what happened with you and her. I got enough issues with her of my own. Well, I guess that's how it feel, to get told, not my circus, not my monkeys. Kind of hard to get upset about it, considering how many times it's been my own attitude. She's not my family, which means I'm not her concern. It's a little annoying, but I guess now I don't need to explain myself to her either. So it's a little bit of weight off of me. I gave her a nod and finished putting away all the lunch stuff. So what time do we need to get you to the airport? She pulled out her phone. Let me check when a flight's available. Oh, and I'll arrange to get the wreck hauled off. As I got the last of the food put away, she announced we would have to leave within an hour, or would have to wait another 5. Since I wanted her gone, and guessed that right now the kids would want the same, I went looking for them. Plan was to take them with me to the airport, then with me on to the grocery store. It would mean a long trip with 3 kids in the car, and a bit of an adult brat for the first half of it. But if I had the kids with me at the grocery store, I could let them, and buy them, I mostly mean Sarah, pick out what they wanted instead of having to listen to her complain about what I decided to pick up. I tracked them down to the hall bath, where Sarah was finishing up on the phone while Ami listened in. Splashing sounds from inside the bath told me the older girl had given up on wiping Aaron down with a damp cloth and just tossed him in the tub instead. I checked my watch. We're heading out in half an hour to get your aunt to the airport. So Sarah, finish up on the phone sometime soon, and Ami, could you get some clean cloths laid out for Aaron? I leaned over her to knock on the door. Finish soaping up and rinse off kiddo, we going to get more food. By their aunt's estimate, we had more time, but having kids along could make the simplest things take forever, and the witch seemed like the sort of girl to always runs late. My jeans and shirt passed the quick look in the mirror inspection. But I had to stop by my room for socks, boots, wallet, change, watch, and my pocket knife. I headed downstairs to get the witches headed toward my car, only to see her standing in the open door of the library on the 2nd floor. She jumped a little when I walked up next to her. She waved at the room. Why? I glanced in. I'm single, and when my friends got married I adopted their collections, then I had the money to buy everything else, so it's more of a why not. She shook her head. No, why a Gatling gun? I could see the rest of it, but how could you even get ammunition for a Gatling gun? Do they even still make whatever you would need for one? I glanced over at the gun. It's replica that can fire .308, but I only fired it once at a gun range and used up everything I had bought for it. Once was enough to try it out, and it was such a pain to clean it I never did so again. Reaching around her I pulled the door shut, cutting off her view before she decided to look around more. I was trying to get her out the door. Other than trying it out, there ain't much reason to use it. Shotgun works fine when bad company comes around. She gave me a wry look. Not you. I shook my head at the very idea. I'd get the deer rifle with the scope and hide behind something several hundred feet away if I was going to shoot you. Safer that way. I started heading downstairs. She followed along with a snort. Try it, old man. See what happens. I waved a finger in the air over my shoulder at her. Remember you gave me permission. No take-backs. She began to protest until I turned around and held out my hand. Keys. I need to move your luggage over to my car. Meet you out front. She glared at me but passed them over. Outside, I found the remains of some fast food packaging in the passenger foot space. A couple of shopping bags full of clothing that looked to be in sizes for all 3 kids, and a single overnight bag in the back seat. Nothing in the trunk. So she wasn't planning on staying all that long, but wanted to make sure the kids had a clean set of clothes in case I had them still just wearing whatever they had arrived in. Not sure what she had been thinking, but at least she had been thinking a little bit about their welfare. I then herded the kids out, after the whines about changing their clothes, then got them in the truck. Tracked down the aunt checking out my swimming pool. Got her in the car, then got Sarah and Ami, who had gone over to look at their aunt's car, back into mine. So 20 minutes late from what I said to the kids, 10 minutes early from what the witch had said to me. I'll take it as a win. It only took us about an awkward 40-minute drive to get to the municipal airport. Although it went faster after I turned on the radio and let the kids choose the station with the rear seat controls. Once there, the witch directed me up to a security gate and spoke across me to the guard. Let me in, call no one. From there she directed me to a private plane. On good, they are still here. I don't have to find another plane. She turned to look into the back seat before she got out of the truck with her one bag. I got you some clothes, kids. I got a little bigger from your sizes at last Christmas. Since I figured it was better a little too big instead of too small. See you guys soon, and sorry about your childhood home. Bye. What a way to make an exit. Leave them wanting less. Ami gave her aunt a cheery wave and a bye, Aunt Rose. Aaron was clonked out in his kid's seat, and Sarah just gave her aunt a long cold stare as the witch walked away. Then she called shotgun, much to her sister's protest. I shoved a notepad and pen into Sarah's hand and told her. Food run. Start writing down a shopping list. That kept them busy writing things down, until the two girls started arguing, naturally, about the health merits of some of Ami's, and a now groggy but awake Aaron's, choices. Write it down. Sarah gave me a betrayed look. Grandpa, they can't eat like that. I shook my head at her. They don't have to. Caramel ice cream topping and marshmallow fluff sounds good. I'll eat it. Write it down. She glared. You're supposed to be a good example. I nodded with a grin. Yep, and kids are supposed to make mistakes so they can learn from them. Just doing my job and giving them enough rope to hang themselves with, or enough junk food to make themselves sick. Same thing. It kept them busy, and not whining about anything, all the way to the local grocery store, Marv's. The three kiddies gave the warehouse-looking store, with all the windowless add-ons, a dubious look. Ami spoke up first. That's a grocery store? I gave her a nod as I got out. And a farmer's market, a butcher's, baker's, and enough handmade stuff it could count as a candlestick maker's. Plus the one wing is like a garage sale. Sarah had already gotten around the SUV and snuck past me as I opened the back door. Then she started getting Aaron out of his seat before I could do it. Fine, he's all yours. Sarah, take a cart and keep track of Aaron while you get your stuff. And let him have what he wants. I wiggled my finger at the boy. If you see something other than food that you want, it's only one thing. If you see something else you want, get it and put the other thing back on the shelf. Don't give your sister a hard time. Ami, you're with me. She gave me a surprised look. You're too old to sit in the cart, right? The surprised look switched to a disgusted one instead as she stomped off toward the carts. Sarah rolled her eyes at me. What? I was just asking? Ami snagged a cart and returned with a pointed look at me while refusing to surrender control of the cart. No. I'm going to push it. I glanced over at Sarah as she walked over to the cart corral under the sheet metal shelter beside the entrance, her brother hand in hers. Okay, but hold up a second. I just want to make sure Sarah and your brother get inside the store first. She gave me a wide-eyed look. I explained. Ninja, werewolves, or even your aunt following us back. I want to see those two at least get in the doors before I let them out of sight. Just humor an old man. She looked all around with a worried expression. I felt a little bad for making her worry. But, paranoia was going to be a way of life for her from now on. 11 is criminally young to have to be on guard all the time, but it was other people's actions that was making me put this on her. So. Their fault, my responsibility. She slowly looked up at me. A sad look in her eyes. This is how it's always going to be for me from now on. Isn't it? I laid a hand on her back and rubbed it a little. Sorry, kid, this is part of growing up for every girl. Always on guard, knowing there are people out there. Unseen. Who are a danger to you. It's just a bit worse for you. I nudged her to begin heading into store. But you got me, and your sister. And soon your father and mother, all here to watch out for you. And in a few years, it's going to be you protecting us. She gave me a surprised look. Wah. You already saved me from your aunt taking over my mind, and that was just you telling me to use what I already had. When you get your training, I'm going to want you to use your magic to keep me from getting blindsided again. She paused in front of the door while she tried to process all of that. Sorry to put this burden on you, kid, but when it comes to all things magical, We're going to need to rely on you. Then I tried to smoothly take control of the cart to at least get her into the store. I could see a woman with 3 kids starting to come up behind us. But she shot me a dirty look and threw her whole 70 pounds behind her as she rushed the cart through the doors and into the store to get it out of my reach. Once in the store, I came to a stop. I hadn't had a real clue on how to feel for things the last time I was in here. 4. No, more than that. Maybe dozens in and out of here, but at least 7 werewolves in the building with me right now. One of them a teenage boy talking to my granddaughter. And looking at me with a slowly dawning look of horror on his face as he looked at me. Realized what he was looking at. Then looked at the young Asian girl by my side, then at the slightly older Asian girl he was flirting with. He made a hasty retreat from the now confused 13-year-old girl who seemed to have no clue why a teenage boy might go running off from an underage girl when her grandfather showed up. Ami caught up with her, a wicked grin on her face. Who was that? Did he ask you out? Sarah looked stunned for a second, then blushed. What? No. That was Neil, he works here. I just wanted to know if they make multigrain breads in their bakery. I shook my head at her. Sorry Sarah, but I'm required to tease you a little about this. She gave me an angry look and raised up one hand in a first. I raised my hands defensively. Not too bad, but I am going to confirm he was flirting. Also, he's like me, so I am so going to mess with him if I see him again. Down at the end of the canned goods aisle I could see the young man in question standing next to a fit young woman dressed in white with a full head covering cloth and flower on her apron. Also a werewolf, and by the looks of it, related to him. So that's what the new guy looks like. And his pretty little granddaughter as well. She nodded to herself. I approve, go ask her to dinner. The boy went beet red. Mom? Not cool, he can hear us. His mom, who looked way too young to have a teenage boy, grinned. Well, he's not invited, I don't want our sheriff to think I'm putting the moose on her man. Besides, I'm mostly happy with your dad. I got a lot of time invested there. That got another protest of mom out of the kid. I chuckled as Sarah looked up and gave me a questioning look. You can hear them, can't you? I was surprised. You can't. She rolled her eyes. How would I even train my ears to hear better? I had some ideas, but Ami interrupted. What did they say? I looked down at her, then turned my head to stare right into Sarah's eyes. His mom approves. He had her permission to court you as his future bride. Oh my. Her face, neck and even her ears went red before she snagged Aaron's hand and began to head off with their cart. We're here to get food, so get to shopping, old man. Since it looked like Sarah was heading off to the far end of the store, I headed down the aisle in front of me first. More peanut butter, a larger jar this time since the kids would be around. Until they weren't. No, don't think like that yet. Besides, it wasn't like I wouldn't finish just about everything off all by myself before any of it went bad. Ami looked up and down the shelves, before zeroing in on a pale yellow jar. I've never even heard of banana jelly? Huh? I have, but I would have had to order it online, and paying for shipping seemed like too much of a waste of money. Grab it and pick out another too. Something you might never try on your own, it's on my dime right now. Treat yourself. She still hesitated. Plus you can pick out something that Sarah would hate? That got her grinning, but she ended up picking out orange marmalade and strawberry jam. The marmalade, because she asked me what marmalade was. I think it's got some of the peel in it. Don't make a face. Get it and try it, and the jam because... Oh, Sarah likes strawberries. I don't think she really gets the concept of messing with her sister. The bakery was at the end of the aisle, and in the spirit of getting the kids to try new things, I picked up a paper-bagged loaf of rye, black, and sure enough, some multigrain bread. Each one with a red stamp with both the date and time it had been baked. Not sure if the time was when it come out or when in the oven. Mom Werewolf came up to the counter from the other side, a pleased grin on her face, then a slight frown. I'm sorry, is there a problem? She shook her head. I was going to offer you something fresh from the oven, then I remembered that those are the last batches of bread for the day. Sorry. I sniffed at the air. Smells like you got something mixed up? She grinned. Blueberry, apple cinnamon, and strawberry muffins. But they're for the oven in the morning, they taste better if they can set overnight. She got a conspiratory look. I can send Neil out to your place to deliver some tomorrow morning. I heard the cutie likes strawberry. Ami's eyes went wide as she looked back and forth between us. I exchanged an evil grin with the baker and held out my hand. John Lathe. I'll take 4 of each, but if you really want him to make a good impression, a few bran muffins would help. Sarah will still end up eating the others, but she likes to pretend that she eats healthy. The baker pulled off one of the flimsy clear plastic gloves off her right hand and shook mine. Gladys Evans. I'm sure she will get over it. Is it something she really needs to worry about, I meant? The baker blushed a little and fidgeted with her hands. I could tell she's something when she came into my store. She glanced down at Ami and gave her a hesitant smile. But not, like us. Just something. But I don't know if it's a sensitive subject. I let her off the hook, pointing over in the direction I felt that Sarah was at. Magic warrior. Then patting Ami on the head, who jerked in surprise. Witch in training. Then pointing back in the direction of Sarah. Too young to tell yet. Actually more like, doing stuff that doesn't match what I've been told anyone else does, so I don't have a clue. But that would be telling, to an outsider. But since Deputy Deborah found all this out last night, I figured that it would have made its way around town by now. Mrs. Even giggled. She's actually pretty, what the word I'm thinking of, discreet. But don't worry, I'll be getting calls all night for the lowdown, since everyone will hear tell we've been talking. Of that, I don't have a doubt. So in regards to your son? She grinned. He's a big boy, since birth. She winced as the memory. Thank God, I heal fast. But he's only just turned 15, so he can't be much older than your Sarah. Mostly I'm just pushing him because he's usually too nervous to talk to girls, but he opened up to her. Maybe because she's a new, cute face. Ami piped up with Sarah's going to be 14 in a few months. I could see that the girl was getting antsy listening to old people talk, and wanted us to get a move on. So I threw her under the bus. The girl's reached her limits of hearing adults talk, so let's settle up on the muffins before she begins whining. Ami whipped her head up at me with a shocked look before she deliberately glared, "Too late, old man." Then she began complaining in her best whiny voice while rolling her eyes and throwing her head back and forth, with plenty of sighs. Are you done? Aren't we supposed to be getting food? I'm hungry, I'm bored, I want to go home. This is taking forever. I messed her hair and got a reel. Hey! Stop it. Our baker had lost it, but got her laughter under control. Don't worry about the muffins, Mr. Lathe, I know how much you're going to spend here between yourself and 3 kids. Considered it a welcoming gift. Sweet, free food. Thanks, I'll be sure to invite him in and show him my gun collection before I tell Sarah to walk him out. That got another laugh from her, and a "Grandpa, you're evil" from the middle grandchild, in an approving tone. Yep. Then I whispered as we walked away. And I get to find out if the boy can keep his mouth shut when I ask him not to talk about the Gatling gun to anyone. The ability to keep secrets might be important for anyone who wants to date one of my grandkids. From there it was down the produce aisle. More veggies and fruit, including some of those other bananas, the plantains, that I was going to have to look up what to do with. Some star fruit and dragon fruit that I would have to do the same with. But those are the 3 Ami picked out as stuff she had never tried before, and since neither had I, it would be a good grandfather-granddaughter experience. Then we met up in the meat section with Sarah and Aaron. The boy had found a 4-pack of Play-Doh somewhere. We looked over each other's carts before trading sides of the store to pick up what each team felt the other had missed. Then we just had the fun of fitting everything in the car, and the debate over picking up fast food or making something healthy for dinner back at home. Since Sarah wasn't driving, the winner of the debate wasn't in much doubt. The kids got loaded up with food, with Sarah taking the healthy option of a salad, and managed to scarf down their meals on the way home. As for me, well, I couldn't eat while I was driving, because that wouldn't be safe. Now I'm really hungry, so you three are going to have to carry everything in while I eat. That got me a dark look from Sarah as she got Aaron out of his seat, but Ami just raced to the back of the truck and opened up the rear door to grab a hold of the bag with the bread in it before heading over to me to hold out her hand. "Keys, please." Then she headed over to unlock the patio doors. The boy grabbed a hold of a double-bagged bunch of meat which he managed to pull free to plop onto the ground and then began dragging it until he got stuck at the steps. The eldest looked at me with her arms crossed while I just stared her in the eye and took a bite of my first baguette. She finally huffed at me and then a hold of one of the handles of the bag of meat, taking up all the weight while Aaron walked along beside her holding on to the other dangling handle. I finished off my last bite of my first burger just in time to call out, "Good teamwork, good hustle," before she made it into the door. Somehow it took just enough time for the kids to empty out the truck for me to finish my meal. Funny how it turned out like that. Of course, that gave Ami time to begin reorganizing where I kept stuff as she started putting things away where she thought they should go. Foiled again, but in my defense, they outnumber me. She still needed me for the tall shelves, at least without risking going all poltergeist by using magic, and I could at least always put everything back to where it were supposed to be after she went to sleep. Speaking of which. Okay kids, let Aaron pick out something to watch for a while, and then you can do what you want after you get him to bed. I'll be up to read to him if he doesn't conk out before I get there. Sarah gave me a suspicious look. What are you going to do while we're upstairs? Ami began pushing her sister toward the stairs, or trying at least. If he's smart, he's going to call his girlfriend. The eldest looked over her shoulder at her sister in confusion. Since when has he had a girlfriend? Ami switched to pulling on Sarah's arms. I'll explain upstairs. Giving me a last bewildered look, Sarah let herself get dragged out. Clever girl. I waited until I felt like the two girls were upstairs and checked the room for the boy. Then decided to step outside. I hadn't seen any fast food wrappers get taken out of the car, so I was going to have to go outside anyways. Plus, I liked to move around a bit when I was nervous. Adora picked up on the second ring. As a younger man, I might have obsessed over what that might have meant. Now, I just assumed that is simply how long she took to pick up. The important thing was that she did, and sounded happy to hear from me. Hello, John. Hi, Adora, do you want to hear from me talking to you, or talking to the sheriff? She hesitated, then decided. Talk to the sheriff and let's get that out of the way. I stopped, realized I had somehow already walked all the way out to the river, and decided to head back toward the front of the house. Plenty of space to walk around on a circular drive when most of your mind on the phone. I also wanted to check on the oil situation, but I made a mental note to wait until we hung up, so that paying attention to her was my primary focus. The kid's aunt, the witch, showed up and wanted to take Ami. Sarah changed her mind. Adora's voice got a little more serious. Debbie said it sounded like a car crash. I stopped and looked at the car, and the 10 feet of skid marks from the tires getting shoved sideways. Pretty much. Sarah hit her aunt. Her aunt hit her car, and the car hit the rim around the middle of the circular drive. No one got hurt, other than the car. Some black magic sort of thing going on. I had Adora take a deep breath, then let it out. She's that strong. Yeah, both of them. There's more. The sheriff made an inquisitive humming noise. Hit me. The aunt. Rosaria. She tried to do something to my mind, and it was like there was nothing I could do about it. It didn't even occur to me to try. Not until Ami got me to use a sort of mental self-control thing I used to control my temper when I got mad as a kid. I taught it to her, and she figured out it did a lot more for self-control than just deal with anger issues. That sounds useful. Any chance you can get me a picture of the aunt? I'd like my people to know what, and who, they might have to deal with. I started another circle around the drive. Got plenty of video of her on the cameras. Hell, I can send a clip of Sarah dropping a proverbial house on the Wicked Witch to my son, he'd probably get a kick out of it. You want a copy too? I'll still look for some good face shots of her as well. Her voice started to sound a lot warmer. That sounds good, John, now talk to me. I stopped and looked back at the car. That sounds good. John, are you okay? You sound distracted. I gave my head a good shake. Sorry. Not important. I just realized the aunt promised to do something about her wrecked car, and that I'm pretty sure there isn't a chance in hell that she'll follow that up. So I got what may be a missing and reported a stolen rental car wrecked in my front driveway. She laughed. I'll send you a number for my grandson-in-law, he can haul it off, then call the rental company to say it was found on the side of road. I smiled and started another circle of the driveway, the first of a few dozen more that night. Thanks, that will be great. But right now, how did your day go? We didn't really get around to defining what the two of us were doing in regards to each other, but we did talk, and Aaron never did get his bedtime story. Morning came and I cooked up some smoky links and eggs. When I asked the kids how they wanted them, it turned out that they were only familiar with sunny side up and scrambled. I was also a bit surprised Sarah wasn't asking for something made with just the egg white. It must have slipped past her research, or it was another bit of healthy eating she decided to just skip. They had omelets before, but it wasn't something they thought of as a choice. Then again, it wasn't like I ever had eggs any different ways than they had, other than hard-boiled. Ami looked up all the ways to prepare eggs on the internet. Turns out there was also over easy where you flipped the egg and got the slimy stuff on the top to crisp up a little. Then varying levels of flipping it and then making the yolk less gooey. Flipping them over without breaking the yolk was going to be a skill I was going to need to develop, but I did like the idea of slime-free eggs. But the meal was missing anything in the way of baked goods, as planned. I just hoped the delivery boy would manage to show up before we were done eating. Just then, my phone buzzed for the front gate intercom to show me a nervous-looking teenage boy sitting on an old-fashioned-looking girls'-style bike with wired baskets on the front and both sides of the bike. Panniers, I think they're called. Both of them had a white bag sitting in them, hopefully full of my muffins. I grinned and pushed the button to open the gate without saying a word. I expected it might be spookier that way. Too bad they didn't make a creaking noise as they opened, but they had been fixed up and oiled before I moved in. Sarah looked up at me with a questioning look as Ami got a look of realization on her face and a big grin. Sarah asked me, "Who is it, Grandpa?" then began to look a bit more excited. "Is it Mom and Dad? I thought they were going to be a few more days." Shoot, didn't mean to get her hopes up. "No, it's just a deliver I was expecting. Muffins. Fresh baked." Ami began to fidget in her chair as Sarah sighed. "Don't we have enough snacks already? We can't keep eating like this, Grandpa. You may be burning it all away magically, but we'll get fat." The middle child finally couldn't hold herself back anymore and leaned over to grab her sister by the arm with both hands. "We got you a puppy." Sarah looked at her sister in confusion as Aaron began to become aware of the conversation. "What?" The eldest turned to stare at me with her typical suspicious look. "You got a dog?" I gave her a serious look. Well, a pup might be an accurate description. I jerked my head at the young man pulling up on his bike by the foot of the patio steps. Kid had figured out to come back to the kitchen, not the front door. He was also on time. 10 points. Sarah turned, saw the boy, turned back to give me a surprised look. Then glanced down at the pajamas she was still wearing from the night before. I pursed my lips. "You might have time to change before he leaves. If you hurry," she hissed. "You will pay for this, old man." Then took off with a leap that sent her chair sliding back into the far wall. Sliding into the hall, she kicked off the corner to take the stairs at what sounded like 3 steps at a time. Ami skipped over to open the patio door. "Hi, Neil." "It's Neil, right?" Sarah will down in a minute, so don't leave or she'll cry because she missed you. The boy, Neil, looked a little overwhelmed, and either blushing or still warm from biking all the way out here. Nope, werewolf. The ride would have meant nothing. So the flush on his face was from the babbling 11-year-old. Then he saw me giving him a look from the other side of the breakfast bar, and went pale. "Ah, good morning, Mr. Lathe. I have a delivery for you? It's prepaid?" I started to ask if he was asking me or telling me, but the kid was just doing his job, and being polite while doing it. So, 5 points. That got me a confused look from the delivery boy and my granddaughter. Meanwhile, Aaron finally finished processing the earlier conversation and looked around. "Dog?" I reached over to patted the kid on the head, safe behind the breakfast bar from any retaliatory kicking. I was thinking about getting a couple of older dogs that were already used to each other from the pound, but not until things settle down. Aaron considered that, then nodded after a moment. "Okay." Then I looked over at the wolf boy. "Pass over the muffins and then let Ami show you around the house. This is your last delivery for the morning, right?" He looked around in a panic. "Ah, yeah. But you don't need to go to the trouble, I can just go." I shook my head. "No way. Your mom would kill you if passed up the chance to tell her all about the place. I'll send Sarah to find you when she's ready." He squirmed a bit but let Ami drag him along behind her. "We can go look at the ballroom first. It's up in the attic but the house is so big the ceiling is only at an angle near the edges, and there are some doors up there even I haven't opened yet, and—" Then they got out of earshot and I arranged the muffins out on a platter. The 6 sad-looking brown ones in the center where Sarah couldn't miss them. I managed to butter and down 2 apples muffins and introduced Aaron to honey butter on what I guessed was a banana one. I tasted one of the crumbs left over from slicing off the top. Yep, banana. It looked like our local baker whipped up a few more batches between the night before and the morning. All that in addition to my original order. I would have to do something nice for Neil's mom. Flowers maybe? I'm not sure if that would be appropriate for a married woman, but if there was some kind of baker-themed arrangement, then again I hadn't gotten flowers for Adora yet. Which might be too soon to do yet. My musings were finally interrupted by the arrival of 2 squirmy teens looking at everything other than each other, as they were led into the kitchen by a still babbling tween-age girl. And then we're back to the kitchen where, ooh, muffins. "Look Sarah, he brought strawberry ones, and those." Ami held up a bran muffin, and held it out as she gave her sister a sad look. "He got the ones you like now too." Sarah took the muffin, glanced over shyly at the delivery boy, and murmured in a soft voice, "Thanks." The boy gave me a panicked look. I gave him a quick thumbs up. 20 points. Both teens gave me a confused look. Then the delivery boy seemed to try to find the right words to ask me something. "Yes, it's a Gatling gun. Working replica. I just like all the shiny gears. Please don't tell your mother, I like to surprise people. There, let's see if you can keep a secret. A valuable skill if you want to date a girl from a clan of people who don't like being called ninjas." The kid shook his head a little, then turned to look over at the girls. "Ah, thanks for showing me around the house." Then he focused in on Sarah. "So I guess I'll see you around school?" Sarah's face ran through a series of expressions. Confused, shocked, pleased, disappointed, concerned. I don't really know what's going on with my family right now, but maybe." She gave him a little smile. "If I do go to school here, it will be nice to see a familiar face." The kid's smile lit up the room. I gave him a moment before I cleared my throat, making him jump and begin scampering toward the door with a glacé back towards my eldest granddaughter. I began to follow him, trying to beat him to the door. "Hold up son, I tip." He hesitated as I dug out a $5. No clue if that was a fair tip. "You talked to a girl, your next quest is getting her to give you her phone number. No fair getting it from the store's phone, you got to get her to give it to you." Then I cracked the door open to return him to the wild bewildered, confused, and no clue what the hell had just happened to him. You know, like every teenage boy dealing with teenage girls. I gave the kid a wave as he headed out, pulling out my phone to let him out since I doubted his bike waited enough to automatically open the front gates. As I turned around, I saw both girls looking at me. Ami with both of her hands on her hips, giving me a challenging look. What was up with the 20 points thing? Sarah was looking back and forth from her joyless, healthy choice of a muffin and the still warm from the oven strawberry ones, but she looked up at the question. Yeah, what the hell was all of that? I took the middle child's question first. It was only fair since she asked first. I wanted to make sure he knew he was being watched and judged every single moment. I counted on my finger on the last 3 words. Turning to Sarah, I gave her an innocent look. He came all the way out here, I just thought it would be nice to show him the house and let everyone say hi. The eldest gave me a suspicious look. Then began cutting the top off her muffin before hesitating and putting a little honey butter on one corner. Nibbling at it, and then slathering it with the sweetened butter to an extent that negated any health benefit to all the bran. Just as we were finishing up eating, of course my son called me. Hi, Dad. I'm sorry for the short notice, but things are moving fast. For once the kids were not all over me as I got a phone call. Only showing a normal amount of interest as Ami finished her apple muffin, and Sarah eyeballed a strawberry one even as she showed every sign of enjoying the bran one. What do you mean, son? The girl's head snapped over to me. Even Aaron began looking up from where he was pushing the crumbs on his plate into some sort of multi-pointed star. Well, I was pushing to get this done on the assumption that both sides would make some power plays due to getting their egos hurt by not having everyone come to them. I could imagine him shaking his head. But I guess they want this done and settled. So they're both heading your way this weekend. Saturday at noon. Well, I guess that gives me a day and a half to learn how to serve tea. Oh no, that's right. Everything has to be in sealed containers. Right? Ami was staring at me while poking her finger up against her other hand, which she was holding up like she had something in it. Sarah had her eyes shut and seemed to be focusing on hearing the other side of the conversation. My son sounded a little surprised. No, actually. Normal food and drink is okay. Not showing trust in their host would make them look weak. Maybe something nice, I'll pick up something they'll both like. Do you have a strainer? Ami was now more urgently poking at her hand and whispering speaker at me. Yeah, I got a whole tea set, including what I'm pretty sure is a strainer. Whole thing is even silver, so I guess that might look like my own power play. Being what I am. Sarah paused in cutting open her second muffin, strawberry, as both she and Ami gave me looks of concern. Their dad sounded a trifle worried as well. That is safe for you, right? I nodded my head for the girls. It is, unless they pinch me with the sugar tongs. Silver is only a problem if it breaks the skin, and then stays in. I've been told the gals use silver earrings to stay human so they can have kids. That got me a huh. Then. So it's going to be Ichiro Ataru. With Yuki's Uncle Dave and her mom Ori as his attendants. I waited, then asked. And? He sighed. And Dora with her daughter Rosaria and my mom. I sighed myself, and then filched as I glanced down and finally noticed that both the girls had crept up to stand up close up to me. Both looking up at me in concern. It's okay, John. I knew I was going to have to deal with her again sooner or later. I do hope the whole kill me if we meet again threat from her mom is over. Yeah. You should have 2 people with you too, or else they won't take you seriously. Me and Yuki can't do it since I'm trying to make sure it's understood my family is a package deal. Well. Adora, as the local law, would normally have been a good choice. But new sort of girlfriend right there when I met old girlfriend / baby mama. Maybe not the best plan. I would have to figure something else out. Then. Me and Yuki should be there by tonight. Both the girls began to squeal, even Aaron seemed excited. So I let them fight over my phone as I took a seat. My son was coming to my home. Here, to my house. I was going to meet him for real, for the first time. Face to face, not over a phone. Aaron was suddenly there looking up at me. Reaching up with both hands to be picked up and hugging me around the neck. Yeah, the weight of the kid on my leg sort of settled me down. My son was on his way. Right. I let the thought settle in so I could stop thinking about it and move on to doing something about it. I smiled at the boy. Thanks, grandson. Now let's go pick out some fresh sheets for your parents' room. We can see if your sister's left us any without barbecue stains. I didn't even mess up his hair. Not the moment for it. There was in fact one set of sheets still clean and fresh in their packaging, but I had been taught to always wash new cloths and linens before wearing or using them. So I left the kid with an old towel and set him to wiping everything in the guest room down for dust while I headed downstairs to put all of the girls' tablecloths in the washer. I remembered to throw in the clean set as well. Should end up with at least one set good to go. There was enough dirty clothes to make it a full load, but I set the machine on hot and large load for just the sheets to hopefully take care of any grease stains. The rest of it would have to wait. Of course I did have space and money to put in a second set of washers and dryers. You know, live it up. But I doubted it was worth it, just the normal one and one would do most days. So now I would have a room ready for my son and his wife, and I had enough food for them and the kids for a weekend. But was I going to have enough to feed the other guests? I would imagine this was going to be a long talk, and I was looking at 6 of them, plus my son, his wife, and the kids. Then myself and my 2 seconds. So 14 people altogether. I was still going to need to find 2 people, and I needed to know what kind of food to get. The one guy was born in Japan. So even living in America for who know how long, it might be an insult to not offer him something from Japan. Even worse if I screw up making that special something, which most likely would be something I had never tried to make before. Yeah. Going to need to talk to the expert about this. From the sound of it, the girls were still talking as I got back to the kitchen, with the phone now on speaker. Hey John, or Yuki, I guess. What should I plan on for dinner for all these people, and since they're going to be here at noon, I'm guessing lunch too. It was Yuki that answered. Turkey for the dinner. A whole Thanksgiving meal in fact. It will irritate my great-grandfather, but it will also symbolism that it is a family meal, and that his family is American now. Something light for lunch, both literally and figuratively, would be nice. Sandwiches maybe? Okay, a bit more of an answer than I was expecting. I wouldn't think upsetting your great-granddad would be the best idea. She huffed. He is going to be upset no matter what. But if it is deliberate and done to make a point, he will be unwilling to acknowledge it. He will also know it was my idea and to some degree respect it. Great. My son married Sun Tzu, sounds like a busy day. But no special dishes, vegetarian or anything like that? She laughed. No. I don't think so. John? My son spoke up. Candy, sweets. Not candy bars, but old-fashioned hard candies and some fancy chocolates. No, let me worry about that, we're making a few stops on the way up there. So I'll take care of those. Those sounded pretty good actually, I hoped he got enough so there would be leftovers. Got it, I'll try to pick up some fancier serving trays. I looked at the grandkids. Say your goodbyes or call them back on Ami's phone, I need mine back. There was plenty of goodbyes on both sides, especially since both girls each just had to say their own goodbyes to both parents and their uncle by name. But I finally got my phone back just as Yuki asked. Is Aaron being extra quiet or do you two lose track of him again? The girls' heads snap around looking for their brother as I spoke up. I left him wiping down the furniture in U2's room. I'll set the girls to tracking him down. She bid me a cheerful okay. See all of you tonight. Bye girls, by Mr. Lathe. I guess I should get her to call me John to show us as being close in front of the witch and warriors. But her husband is also named John. Should I tell her to call me Dad? The girls ran off as I stood there pondering that. I guess I wasn't going to know how that would feel until she did, but it would avoid some confusion. At least until on some future day that me and her father ended up in the same room and we had double dads. Next, I poked the button for Shyster Charles. Hey Uncle John. I'm planning on heading up to my dad's this afternoon. Are you going to be able to do the thing this weekend? Yeah. About that. The head of my ex's family, the Witch Queen. She's going to be here tomorrow at noon for a meeting with the head of a clan of magical warriors for hire. That's Yuki's family. Along with 2 sidekicks each including my ex. I suppose to have 2 people with me as the host to have even numbers. My son and his wife, who will be here tonight, don't count. I also have to lay out an entire Thanksgiving dinner for tomorrow as well as putting out a spread for lunch. My nephew made a sort of distracted "yeah-huh" sound. So I figure having a lawyer present might help, especially one related to the kids by blood. So will you be my second? There was a pause. Then. I'm going to need more details, and it's a yes, but I still a lot more details. I nodded at the phone. I'll call you after lunch, better yet, I'll talk to my boy and see if he's good with talking to you himself. He's some sort of agent for hire and knows the protocol for this sort of thing. Charles sounded much more reassured. Now that sounds good, I got someone else I just found out is on the inside of this kind of thing. Someone I can talk to after the sun sets. Oh? Oh. Then you should definitely talk to my son. There is a lot of subtext in knowing someone like that than either of us have been read in on. He snorted. Yeah, I picked up of some of that. What about my dad? I grinned to myself as the girls wandered in with their brother and glares on their faces. Directed at me? What did I do now? Well, your dad loves to cook, and I got 2 meals to prepare tomorrow. I also need another second. I'll get him over here myself. Charles agreed. Yeah, it might look good having 2 family members there, especially if they think there's a whole gang of werewolf relatives backing up your son. Let's have some subtext of our own. We said our goodbyes while the girls kept switching from one impatient pose to another, sighing, and crossing their arms. Finally, I ended the call and asked. What? Sarah walked up to me and laid her hands on my shoulders. Grandpa, you can't tell Aaron to do things without telling him when he can stop. He had finished the room and was halfway down the hall dusting things. Ami moved up to stand behind her sister. The front half of things, he couldn't reach the back half of most of the stuff you had out there. So they did need dusting, but he would have kept doing it until he got tired enough to sit down somewhere and then fall asleep. We can't even play hide and seek with him at the compound because we didn't know how to tell him when he could stop hiding if we don't find him. I glanced over at the boy. He shrugged. Jimmy lied to get me to come out. Well, then doing some dusting might be a good idea. We don't want to give them anything to complain about. Even if the place is clean enough for living in. I nodded to myself. Right now, it's clean enough to be fine for at least a few months. Maybe even to spring. The girls looked at each other, glanced at the Aaron and looked back at each other. Ami sighed. Okay Aaron, let's finish dusting everywhere. I'll get the tops, you get the legs. Sarah turned to me. I saw where the vacuum was, so I'll hit the carpet and sweep everywhere else. I smiled at her, thanks you too, A3. If you can strip all the beds and get the sheets down the chute, I'll run them through the machines by tomorrow morning. The 3 of them set off. I don't know if they're always this good, or if they just understood how important this was to their families. But it was nice to have someone else taking on some of the work all on their own. Speaking of help, I called my brother. It took a few rings for him to answer on his landline. Hello? Hi Drew. I got some news, and I need a few favors. I'm also on the clock, so I don't have time to go over things more than once. My brother sounded a bit concerned. Well, first, what do you need? I thought for a second. He waited fairly patiently, only clearing his throat after a good long minutes. Sorry. starting thinking about everything else I need to do after we're done talking. I need Grandma's serving platters, the roaster, and I'm going to have to call you back with a list of things to pick up on the road. You can use the debit card I got you for that, and I'll put some more money on it before I call with the list. I began digging in the junk drawer for a pad of paper and a pen. In fact, let me write that down so I don't forget. He laughed. Our mother had loved her lists. Sounds like you're having a party. I grinned. Yep, and I need your help to not only get everything together, but also to cook it, and be here to help represent our family. That got me a long pause. Okay. I think I'm going to need you to get to the news part here. I'll need a second to put it words. Words he could believe anyways. How to put this without the supernatural stuff? My girlfriend from collage, the one that disappeared. I got an affirmative grunt. Well, the reason she vanished on me was because she got pregnant and her family put pressure on her to never tell me about it. I only found out when she sent my son's 3 children to come stay with me, because her family and his wife's family are fighting over who gets to decide what to do with one of the kids. Ami is gifted, and both sides have their own opinions about how she's going to be raised from here on out. I, mostly, volunteered to host a meeting between the 2 sides. So I'm asking you and Charles to be here to not only help me put all this together, but to show that our family has an interest here as well. Drew jumped in as soon as I stopped talking, sounding like he was trying to hold back from going on a rant. And you didn't think that it a mite suspicious that you suddenly got a son right after you got all that money? That the first time you hear from this woman, after 30-some years, is after you got something worth taking? I sighed and reached out however it was that I could, to check the positions of the kids. Little ears, you know. Believe me, I got almost nothing but suspicions. But I'm not changing my wool or paying off anyone debts here, Drew. All I've agreed to do so far is watch some kids for a few days, and host a dinner party. Nothing major in terms of money is going to happen without a DNA test. Even then my money is going into collage funds for all the grandchildren who haven't already gone, and then payouts to you, James, Samantha, and the kids. If he is my son and they are my grandkids, the best they will get is the same cut. My brother sounded a little hurt. You know I don't care about your money, John. The help with my medical care and the meat is nice, and my boys are both out of school and are doing fine. I just don't want you to get taken advantage of or to get hurt by that woman again. I leaned back against the kitchen counter and looked down at the floor. I didn't mean to imply anything, Drew. But I'm entirely certain these kids are ours. The eldest girl, she's got mom's eyes. I know that ain't exactly proof. But it's at least enough for me to treat them as family until I know otherwise. Drew sighed. Well, I guess it's worth meeting them either way. So what all do you need me to pick up? I started making a list, adding a few things as my brother suggested them and adding a capital D in a circle for the things he was picking up. Then I remembered a promise I had made that morning and added a few more things to the list for him to get. My brother gave an evil laugh. Well, I guess you are treating him as family. See you in a few, well, more like several hours. Then he hung up on me. I moved to the list of names, a short one, of the additional people I need to call that morning. Good morning, Adora. I need some help from a local, and I guess there were a few other things I should have told you about earlier. Sorry,